Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7:30, and I will call the August 19th, 2014 meeting of the Planning Board to order. Remind everyone to make sure your microphone's turned on and you speak clearly into it when you present testimony to the board. And also, please sign in on the clipboard here. Make sure that your name is legible when you do that. Our next Planning Board meeting, Tim, is
September 9th.
September 9th. And the next meeting of the sidewalk and pedestrian
September
bicycle?
16th.
September 16th. I have two other correspondence that I received through email. Some of those may have gone to the rest of the board. One is from the National Regional Planning Commission, addressed to Tim Thompson, indicating that the NRPC is pleased to announce that a draft 2015 to 2035 Nashville Regional Transportation Plan is available for review and comment on their website, granitefutures.org. And I think that you can probably contact Tim if you want to get some more information about that. I also received, forwarded by Nelson, a newsletter for the transportnh.org organization about various transportation initiatives, which is available. So those are the two items of correspondence that I've gotten as the chairman. With that, turn to item 2 on our agenda, which is the Planning and Zoning Administrator's Report. Tim, is there anything to report today?
Just a brief heads up for the board. I was contacted by the folks in general government late last week. There's some state law changes that took place actually several years ago now that relate to our junkyard section of the zoning ordinance. So I've been asked to make a couple of minor clarifications to that section to bring forth to the planning board for recommendation to council to make those minor administrative changes. While doing that, since that section still had references to the Board of Selectmen, I took it upon myself to go through the rest of the ordinance, find where it said Board of Selectmen and replace that with Town Council, and made a couple other minor administrative changes. So hopefully be bringing those to the board sometime in the next month or so, so that they can be passed on to the council for final action.
Thank you. Any questions on that issue? Any questions for any other issues for the staff by members of the board? Hearing none. Before we move on to the various applications, I'll use the chairman's privilege to reorder the agenda so that we will hear the home occupation application of Michael Maliar ahead of the Edgebrook Heights. Since we've got so many people that are interested in hearing that application here tonight, we'll go ahead and put that first and address that issue. And so with that, the next item on our agenda is item number 4, Michael Maliar as the owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of an application to permit a home occupation for a firearms service, maintenance, transfers, and assembly business located at 11 Blair Road in the R Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 6C, lot 170. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Just that in your packets you'll have the memo from Donna Poley outlining the request and the recommendations for the board.
Okay, I know this. We've also gotten several correspondences which I intend to read into the record when we get to the public hearing part of this presentation. But there are 2 correspondences and a series of what looks something similar to a petition kind of an arrangement that we will address when we get to the public petition part. With that in mind, is Mr. Maliar here? Please come forward. Right there. Push the button on the microphone to make sure it's on, sign in on the clipboard, and then tell us a little bit about what you're proposing to do.
The reason that I'm here tonight is I'd like to get permission for a home occupation to do gunsmithing services.
I'm not sure your microphone is on. Is that light really bright green?
Yep.
Okay. Bring it a little closer to you. Just pull the whole thing towards you. There you go.
What I'm looking to do is to provide gunsmithing services, basically meaning that I'd like to do maintenance and repair on firearms. There's not going to be any sales, no discharging of any firearms. That's all going to be done at Manchester Firing Line or one of the fishing game clubs that I would need to do any of that work. So basically I'm looking to be like your auto mechanic, that you could bring your firearm to me. I can clean it, do whatever you need done, and then return it back to you. I've been going through all the channels. I received the permits and such from to receive the license to sell pistols and revolvers, which I don't plan on doing, but it's just part of the process that I've found that you have to go through when you're trying to get into this trade. And basically it's not going to be any gun cases. There's not going to be any firearms that are going to be for sale. Any guns that would be sold or transferred would only be on a special order basis. I'm not looking to have a full gun shop that you would see on the side of the road where they have, firearms all over the place. I just want to be the guy in the back that just does the service and maintenance on the products.
So when you say transfers by special order, if I went online somewhere and I bought a gun and I had it shipped to you,
I would be able to transfer that
it. So
legally through.
it's a little bit similar to a sale, although it's not inventory that you had.
Right, and I'm only looking for a very small number of clients. I'm looking for like 20 or 25 clients just to take care of, not, I don't want the whole state of New Hampshire coming to my home. Anything that's done in my home will be done on a no walk-in service. It's going to be all done by appointment only.
How long have you lived at 11 Blair Road?
20 years.
How much of your home would you use for this business?
I set up a bench that's about 600 feet, 600 square feet.
Is there, when you take in guns to repair them, you're obviously going to keep them on site for a while. How do you intend to secure them?
I have locked cabinets, locked gun cabinets that they would be in. The only people that are in the household are me and my wife. My wife obviously isn't going to be doing this, so it's going to be basically myself.
Sure. You have a personal collection of guns?
Yes, I do.
How do you store those?
They're all in locked cabinets.
Okay. Is your site inspected by the state
Yes.
for this license? So have they already done that, or is
I
that
had,
something that's gets
well, actually, the federal firearms ATF had come over to my home and, gone through everything.
So they've done that already?
Yes.
They have any issues with the way your home is set up for this business?
Yes.
What were their issues?
They, as long as I came through the town and to got the permission, and then I had to go to the police chief and the town selectmen to receive this other permit, which
Have you been
I've
before the
gotten.
town selectmen already?
nope.
Okay.
They had the police, when I went over to the police department, they had forwarded my
Information. Okay.
information.
So what you provided to us is a state of New Hampshire license to sell pistols and revolvers issued by the State Department of Safety, and it's signed by our town manager and our chief of police here in town.
Yes.
All right. Do you have a gun safe or additional lock cabinets, or what do these lock cabinets look like?
They're about 5.5 feet tall. They're maybe 10 or 15 inches wide by 20 inches deep.
Okay.
They're made for
is something
long
designed
arms.
and intended to lock up guns? It's not a
They are
cupboard.
They are guns.
Okay. Have you done the gunsmithing business before?
No.
So this is something new to you?
Yes.
Did you apprentice with somebody to learn how to do it, or how you learning?
I've been doing it, and I also taken classes.
Where do you take classes?
I went through Ashford College.
Okay. What kind of training is involved with learning how to do this?
Assembly, disassembly. They teach you how to do, cleaning the barrels and alignment, changing sights, stocks.
Okay. Do you have any kind of alarm system in your home?
No, I don't.
Is anything required by the ATF for that, or from the state?
No.
For an alarm? Okay. Does anybody else have questions?
Yeah.
they wanna offer?
If you're only maintaining the guns, can I assume therefore you don't need to have ammunition in the house?
There will not be any ammunition from any guns that people bring to me.
So You may have some ammunition, but purely for your own personal
Yes.
guns.
Right. I don't want anybody bringing ammunition because I have no intention on firing their weapon unless I bring it off-site to do that.
Okay.
Like if I had to go to Manchester firing line to safely check the operation, then I would purchase the ammunition.
So we could perhaps, by that, jump to the conclusion that in fact the situation, as far as the neighbour's concerned, is not changed. That you've always had guns with your ammunition in your home,
Yes.
and now all you are doing is bringing unloaded guns into the neighbourhood.
That's it.
Thank
They
you.
will be disassembled too. So I see the evening and weekend hours. This is a part-time effort for
It's
you?
just a part-time thing, just to give me something to do.
What's your day job?
I work for Eastern Propane and Oil.
Okay. And so when you say 5 to 8 p.m. On evenings and 12 to 4, is that an estimate or you plan to?
Yep, no, that's just an estimate on when I'd be able to, because I have to work around my day job, which I don't get home till after 5 o'clock. And everything that I do is going to be by appointment only, so that's the only time that I would be able to have somebody either pick up or deliver.
Okay. Now, if you specify a specific schedule like that in your presentation to the planning board and we ultimately decide to grant you the requests that you've had, you are limited to those specific hours.
That
if
or
you believe
less.
that there might be some additional hours, you should probably consider whether you want to propose those
Yes,
as a part of this effort rather than doing that later. So, do you want to stick with the schedule you've proposed?
yes,
Okay. That means that if you decide that you want to be open at 11 a.m. on a Saturday, you got to come back and get another review before this board before you could do that. You understand?
I'd like to stay at 12 to 4.
Okay. So, any other questions by members of the board? Tom?
So the cabinets, they're secured in the house, or?
Yes, they are. They're actually drilled to the foundation of my building, so nobody's going to get them out.
Okay. And what kind of security does the cabinet itself have? Just
I have
for description for your,
there's 3 cabinets, and they're all bolted together, and they're all lagged right to the foundation.
What material? What are they made of?
Steel.
Thank you.
Is it a padlock or is it a lock that's integral to the cabinet itself?
They're locks in the cabinets.
Okay. Mike?
If you could provide just some information on the kind of methods of, worker safety that you provide for yourself when you're working on guns. Would you ever get a firearm that would maybe have ammunition that was jammed?
I would have to do that as a case-by-case thing. I've never, this is something new, and that I would, obviously, I would have to, take care and, trying to dislodge, which I would most likely go to one of the other gun shops and talk with their gunsmith and, to see how to do that safely.
As far as cleaning and working with the equipment, is there any chemicals that you would use to do that type of work?
It's all gun oils and gun sprays that are used, and it's all done with swabs and, no harsh chemicals.
Some of those have some alcohols in them typically.
Some of them do, yes.
So you'll have wipes that'll have
Yep.
the isopropyl alcohol likely
Yes.
on it. How will you manage that?
I wear latex gloves whenever I'm working with any of that stuff, and I always wear a mask if I'm using any chemicals that are, that I'm working with, so I don't inhale any of that stuff.
And then as far as the trash, how will you manage that, the wipes and the trash that you'll have?
That's all. I have trash bags in all my cylinders that I do any work with, so it's all double bagged.
And then just one other question, with regards to the license, it looks like there's a room for a license number and then an expiration date. Is that something that will follow in the mail?
I really don't know. That was issued to me by the police department.
Okay. Because typically things like that would have some sort of seal. Tim, do you know if there's any further documentation that would be required to
I
validate the
believe
license?
that would be formalized and finalized after Ms. Maliar attends the town council to get their final approval on the
Okay.
license.
Stan?
In your letter, with the application, it said you have 30-plus years working on firearms.
I've been doing this, for myself. I've been
Unofficially.
doing the, yes, unofficially. I've been doing this all my life, and that's what I do for a living is,
To maintaining
maintaining.
your own
Right.
fire. Okay, thank you.
Service and maintaining, everything, not just firearms.
Other comments or questions? Tom?
Can you talk a little about your experience? You have several guns. Are you a member of the local fishing and hunting clubs so that you can go out and shoot them periodically,
I don't-
frequently, or?
I don't hunt and fish myself.
Okay.
And I usually go to like the Manchester firing line to go to shoot, because I only shoot targets,
Mhm.
and I'm more of a builder than anything. I like making things.
But
You know,
you've been maintaining your own equipment
Yes.
for many years now.
Yep.
on a-
Anytime I go out shooting, I come back and I clean it and I put it away. Gets locked back in the cabinet, unloaded.
Okay. What kinds of weapons are you talking about? Are we ranging completely from pistols to rifles, shotguns to?
Yes, I have a full range of. I have a couple of pistols. I have hunting rifles. I have, like Winchester 94, 30-30. I have AR-15s. Everything that I have is all legal and
Legal and
accepted
registered
in
and all
the.
that good stuff, obviously.
Yep.
Right? You wouldn't be talking about it here, but.
And the ATF might have
No, and
picked
that's
up on
why
that
I'm
one.
here. I'd rather tell you right up front.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So the anticipation of working on equipment is a complete range of equipment that might come in? I mean, you just talked about what you have. Do you anticipate specializing in pistols or rifles or shotguns or?
I prefer to do like bolt action rifles and pistols, but I can work on a range of,
Do you do any antique stuff, black powder, any of that kind of stuff?
I've built black powder as just, wall hangers and stuff, but I've never fired them. Just to know how they operate and, how to blue the barrel, how to do the stocks and all that stuff.
And do you anticipate doing that kind of work as well, bluing and things of that nature? Or?
I'm really not set up to do that kind of work. I just want to primarily be a maintenance person.
Because that brings in a whole other set of chemicals,
Right.
right? I mean,
Yep.
We're trying to get a handle on what toxicity level there might be.
No,
Which is why he
I'm
was
just
asking about-
basically looking to do, your average, cleaning. If you're gonna go out and you wanna go hunting and you don't wanna clean your weapon when you come back, you bring it to me, I clean it, go through it, make sure everything's oiled properly, turn around and give it back to you. And that's pretty much what I'm looking to do.
Okay, thank you.
Desiree?
So people will drop off their firearms with you, and they'll not stay on site while you work on it. They'll just drop them off, and then you'll start
They're
going
gonna
through
drop
the
them off,
process.
I'll do it myself.
Okay.
I'll be the only one there.
How long typically does it take to turn around, to go through, clean it, and get it back to it? How do you get them back to them?
This is all brand new to me, so I'm not really sure. I know that at home that I can take, an hour or two to do it, so if I had somebody come today, it would probably be the next day or the day after
Right.
that I'd be able to turn it around and have it back to them.
Okay. In terms of marketing for your business, you said you weren't going to have any signs up. Is it just word of mouth, or how?
Yes, just
so-
word of mouth. There's not gonna be any advertisement whatsoever.
Okay.
It's just, working for people, and then just, if you like my services, then you would, refer somebody else.
Okay. And then part of getting the license that was in here, you have to get, do you have to do a FFL license, the Federal
Yes, I do.
Firearms License for that? And then the process for that was that they walked through your house and did an
They
inspection.
came over, he was there for about maybe 3.5, 4 hours, the officer.
Okay.
I went through, I turned that paperwork in as well, showing that he came over.
Do they come back in the future? Is it something that they
No,
periodically do, or is it like a one and you're done?
They do inspections. They say that they're gonna be there at least once a year unannounced,
Okay.
and that they will only come during the times that I would be open.
Okay.
Um,
In regards to the comment about maybe having something stuck in the barrel, like if you have like a squib in the barrel of the gun, if you go to clean that out, like you wouldn't do that from your house, right? Like if you had that in
No.
there, you would go to like
I'd go,
Manchester Firing Line or
yes,
and so that's the only place you have a membership for. You don't not a member of an outdoor range.
I was never a hunter or fisher type
Right,
person.
but you could do targets on the outdoor
Right.
ranges as well. That's just why
I've
asked.
never pursued that. I've always just gone to Manchester.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's all I have for questions. Thank you.
And Lynn, you had a hand up.
Well, I got a follow-up to something Desiree just mentioned, that something stuck in the barrel, and you said you wouldn't do that there. If we grant this permit, would you be allowed to?
Pardon me?
I said, if we grant this permit, would you be allowed?
Would I be allowed to remove something from a barrel?
Yep.
I would hope so.
Okay. And following up on Tom's comment, you said you don't usually get into bluing, but would this, if we grant this permit, would that prevent you from doing that?
No, if I felt that I wanted to do any other, in more detail services of
Okay.
that nature, I would come back here and let you know what I want to do, and I'd have to propose that again.
I don't think that would be necessary, would it?
If
I
we
mean,
put
Well, it
conditions of
depends on what you-
approval upon his request that said that he's limited to the hours and the no employees and no advertising and all of that, and the kinds of services that he says that he would do, those would be restrictions upon him.
So we could limit chemicals?
Yes.
Okay.
Which I
Yes.
don't have a problem doing, because that's not what I plan on doing.
And generally speaking, any affirmations that applicants make to boards as part of the approval become part of the approval process and go to the basis of the approval, so they can be enforceable too. I did mention employees, and I noticed in your submission that you don't intend to have any, that this is just something that
me.
you intend to do.
Just me.
Okay. Other comments or questions by members of the board? I know that we're going to have quite a bit of public testimony. Before we do that, let me go through the couple of correspondences that we have to read into the record. The first of them is a correspondence from an Edward Hall, who identifies himself as a medical doctor living at 12 Dodier Court, and it is addressed concerning planning board meeting of August 19th to consider application by Michael Maliar for permit to have a firearms business at 11 Blair Road. Dear Planning Board, I will not be able to attend the hearing on August 19th, 2014, but I would appreciate you reading my thoughts into the testimony at the hearing. I live in close proximity to the 11 Blair Road property. The thought of having a firearms business in this neighborhood is very scary to me. This is a family neighborhood with young children, and I'm afraid for all of our safety. A gun business is a prime target for burglary and other unsafe activity. I would hope that our police department is opposed to the application. This is a zoning issue, not a Second Amendment issue. A business selling and servicing firearms belongs in a commercial zone and has no place in a residential area. This application is inappropriate, and I am absolutely opposed to it. I have lived and worked in Merrimack for 32 years, but it's time to move. If this permit is approved, please deny it. And that is signed Edward Hall, MD. There's also a series of what looks somewhat like a petition, the first of which is from a Melanie Carter and a Kevin Carter of 24 Whispering Pines Lane, and they actually changed the intent of the petition that they signed to say that they are not opposed to the gun shop at 11 Blair Road. They've crossed out the statements that indicate that a gun shop will devalue the property, or a gun shop will bring crime to the neighborhood, or the gun shop will be unsafe for her children, and they've indicated that they would not attend. The petition is filled out again by Michael and Carol Mullen of 21 Brenda Lane, who are opposed to the gun shop at 11 Blair Road and indicate that they think it will devalue the property, bring crime to the neighborhood, and that it's unsafe for our children, and they indicated that they are here tonight. I don't know if I can read them. Alan, I don't know if I can make out the last name on that.
Lives at 6 Whispering Pines Lane, if
It's
that
6
helps.
Whispering Pines Lane, who is not here, who's opposed to the proposal for the reasons stated in the petition. There's one from Carol Provost and Richard Provost of 28 Brenda Lane, who indicated that they are here and they are opposed to the proposal. There's one from Carol Babel of 6 Brenda Lane, Merrimack, New Hampshire, indicated that they're not here but are opposed to the application. And Rebecca Thompson of 14 Brenda Lane, who is not here and indicated that she's opposed to the application. And then lastly, and I think this may be the same name that I was trying to make out on that other one, Joelle and Douglas Lantine of 29 Brenda Lane.
No, they
No,
were
it's different address, you're right.
different.
Have written a correspondence indicating that we will be unable to attend the hearing regarding this matter, but would like to express our concerns. We moved to our home on 29 Brenda Lane 1 month ago, and we were greatly concerned to hear that a firearm business was being considered in what is essentially our backyard, as our home directly abuts the 11 Blair Road property. We have 2 young boys and are concerned that strangers will be coming into our neighborhood with firearms as our children are riding their bikes and waiting for the school bus. It is distressing to contemplate all the other unknowns that this type of business could lend to the neighborhood. Please, we are against a firearm shop being opened in the neighborhood and ask that you consider the safety issues that passing this could present. Sincerely, Joelle and Douglas Lantine of 29 Brenda Lane. Those are the correspondences, the written correspondences that have been provided to the board. Tim, are there any others that I have overlooked? There's a longer package, but I think
Yeah.
that person intends to present that package today. Is that correct? Okay. With that, let's open up the matter for a public hearing. If there are any abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in and offer the board something to consider with respect to this application, now is the time to come forward and present the information. I see a couple hands up. Gentleman in the blue shirt, please come forward. If you'd like, you can sit here while you present, or if you just want a quick comment, you can do it at that microphone. Don't forget to sign in. Mr. Maliar, can I ask you to let them have this table and you grab that bench right there until the public testimony ends? Thank you so much. Make sure that microphone's on, too.
Okay.
I don't think it's on. Push that button again.
Now it's blinking.
Okay, good.
Okay. Notwithstanding the,
Hang on a second. Before you start, introduce yourself, please.
oh, yeah. My name is Bob O'Neill, live on 31 Brenda Lane. My wife and I have resided there for approximately 40 years. And by the way, I want to thank whoever it was that took the trouble to run the copies of the notice pertaining to this hearing and distribute them, because we didn't have any knowledge of it. That's probably our failure, but nevertheless, we didn't know about it.
Yeah.
And so I want to thank whoever it is. We have lived there, enjoyed a comfortable life there, and I believe it's been a very safe neighborhood in all. But I have serious concerns about the possibility of a firearms business being located on Blair Road, which is directly across from us. The only separation is the power lines between our house and Blair Road. I'm concerned that a firearms business is being considered, because it's a very residential neighborhood. I mean, in spite of the fact that it may be a small volume business, it is a business. And as such, word does get out, and as such, it does attract customers or people, and it does have to have some level of inventory. All that being considered, maybe of a minor level or a small level, it exists. And it exists in a business. It doesn't exist in someone's home necessarily. Okay. Now, why is it important to me that a business not be here? I think, frankly, that a business of this nature will be known. I think, frankly, that it has a strong possibility of attracting the wrong element. I think it creates somewhat of a target when held in a residential area. And I think there are 2 firearms businesses that I'm aware of on DW Highway about 2 miles and 4 miles away from Blair Road today. And I also think if somebody was interested in maintaining firearms and providing the service, they may be, and it's just an opinion, better off looking to tie in with an existing company in a commercial area to provide the service that they have in mind of providing. Okay. And I don't know that, but that would be my thought on it. I think also that let me get this right.
Take your time.
I think also that the safety issue is rather important. And again, it deals really, in my opinion, with young people, and it leads itself to a concern, frankly, for the value of real estate. One of the letters you read, was written by people who have just moved into the neighborhood. They may be our neighbors. I don't know that they are or not. But our neighbors of 20 years have recently moved out and sold their home to a family, young family with 2 young children. And they got a very good price for their home. Now, I have a hard time believing, and as a matter of fact, I don't believe, that given a firearms business in the area, when people are appraised of that with young children, that it will not, at the very best, diminish the selling value of property in the area. Okay? I can't accept anything that says it wouldn't, because it doesn't make sense to me. Now, there are no stores in our neighborhood, to my knowledge. There are no shops in our neighborhood, to my knowledge. Okay? It's existed for about 50 years, done very well, is a comfortable area, and is, in fact, a neighborhood. I see no compelling reason to provide a license for a firearms business to start a shop in our neighborhood. I really don't. I think that this isn't really got anything to do with Second Amendment rights or anything of that nature, and I'm sure no one's mentioned it, so I'm sure it's well understood. But it has a lot to do with retaining the character of an established neighborhood in this town that at one time was one of the better neighborhoods, in my opinion. And since we moved there, maybe our influence has reduced its value somewhat. But nevertheless, it's still a very fine neighborhood. And I would like very much to see everything done to protect it. And in my opinion, protection of that neighborhood means paying attention to every little detail that may have an adverse effect. And there are certainly a lot of little details with a firearms business that may, and in my opinion, probably will have an adverse effect. So I therefore think that the business doesn't belong in the neighborhood. I think it should not be licensed to be in the neighborhood. And I therefore ask the committee, the board, to reject the request for a license and to deny the permit. And lest there be any doubt, I'm also a gun owner.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Are there any questions by the board? Mr. O'Neill, you want to answer questions? I don't know if there are any, but any members of the board have questions?
Just one quick question, and it'll probably be the same one. Mr. O'Neill, were you aware that Mr. Maliar had guns in his home up to now for the last 30-something years?
That he had guns as an individual?
Yes.
No, and there's an awful lot of other people I don't know have guns as individuals, and frankly, I don't care.
Thank you.
What I care about is a business.
I understand, but thank you very much for the answer.
I think this gentleman with the red jacket on in the back row had his hand up a little earlier, too.
My name is Daniel Jaskowitz. I am a resident at 16 Whispering Pines Lane, just down at the other end of the block from the gentleman here. I wish to express my concern over the same type of concerns over having a gun shop or business there. I have a few thoughts to convey, and if it's acceptable with everybody, a question or two to ask Mr. Mallet, nothing confrontational by any means.
You can offer the board any thoughts that you want and suggest any questions that you'd like the board to
Okay.
ask, but there isn't an opportunity to directly have a question and answer or examination period with Mr. Maliar.
Okay,
But if
start-
you suggest questions to us, I'm almost certain some member of the board will probably convey your question for you.
That'll be fine. Certain questions that, again, probably should be answered and whatnot. Basically, among my concerns is, number one, there's no alarm system. Number two, the quality of the cabinets that they be kept in. There's a difference between a safe and a cabinet. A cabinet doesn't have the strength of a safe or whatnot. Oddly enough, about 2 or 3 months ago, I spent a few moments at the Nashua key and lock business, getting a lock, and they were playing a video about gun cabinets to where, or gun safes and various safes that were sold at, trying to, tout the quality of their safes, that were sold at like a Walmart or Target or, big box store, what have you, and shown how two people can open that safe with a crowbar in less than 2 minutes. Now, with a cabinet, again, I don't know the quality, what kind of locking mechanism. Is it more of a vault, something that's going to, be more cumbersome to break into than a steel cabinet? And a steel cabinet can be anything from a filing cabinet type of material onto 4 or 5 inch thick vault material. And there's a difference. My other concerns is that he does have a permit to sell. Now, what is going to prevent him from selling as long as he has a permit to do so? Somewhere down the line, like any business, everybody wants to grow, everybody wants to do a little bit better, make a little more money. And what recourse would anyone have if he's granted this permit or granted this license and has a permit to sell, other than his word to say he's not going to sell guns? The other part of my concern is that he did mention guns can be shipped to him by people who have, from a manufacturer, and that he would give it to the people that bought them. Now, I can't even imagine in my mind why that would even happen. Not in a good sense. That if somebody buys a brand new gun, other than wanting somebody to show him how to use it, take it to the gun range or something like that, and how to maintain it, I don't understand why it would happen that way. But that was given as a scenario that is possible. And from there, where does it stop? Where does it go? What are the limitations? Again, he has no alarm system on the home. And as far as his customers, I'm not sure what laws or regulations exist or anything like that, but in the same token, is there going to be any auditing of a sense of his customers, the type of guns they're bringing, done on any kind of regular basis other than the state inspector coming down once a year to say, okay, this is your house, yep. This is your bench, yep. You got a cabinet here, okay. There are a lot more areas of questions than I feel there are answers for. And if he does keep a record, who would inspect these records, who would be charged with making sure that he stays within the realms of his permit. Now, I'm not going to say that he's out to do anything illegal by any stretch of the imagination. But once again, the concern comes because we are in a neighborhood. And this is an area, like Mr. O'Neill has mentioned, there are young children, there are young couples, there are older people. I too am a gun owner. It's not a matter of I want guns out of the area. I really don't care who has what guns. But I am concerned, whether it's by word of mouth or anything else, that they're being brought in by people not from the neighborhood. And right now, I think that's pretty much all that I have. And I thank you for your time and thank you for this opportunity.
Hold on one second, Mr. Jaskowitz. There may be some questions for the
Sure.
board, and then a couple of the things that you've raised as questions, I can offer at least my thought on. Some of those questions I'll have to convey to the applicant, but on a couple of those issues from the planning board's process, I might be able to provide you with a little bit of feedback that you can take with you.
Okay.
With that. Are there questions?
May I ask, you very kindly told us that you have a gun, for which thank you. Do you have an alarm on your house?
No, I do not.
And do you have a large 4-inch thick safe in your house keeping that gun safe?
No, I do not.
Thank you.
The couple of issues that you asked about safety and all that, I'll let the applicant discuss that a little bit. In terms of his authority to sell guns and what does he do, does his business sort of creep into growing and selling guns forward? In terms of his approval by this board, we're approving a home occupation to do what he has told us that he's going to do. If he does anything beyond that, he doesn't have the approval of this board to do that. That would be the same as if he tried to sell guns in his house today without any authority to do that. We're not granting him authority to do that, and he doesn't have the ability to let his business sort of creep into that in terms of our authority. And then separate from our own authority, you talked about the idea of him having guns shipped to him to transfer. Having had a pistol that belonged to my brother that I wanted to ship to him in Florida, I know that you have to get gun dealers to do that. You can't just drop them in the post office and have UPS deliver them, although UPS and the post office is the courier that delivers them from place to place. It has to go gun dealer to gun dealer. And so that if you found some online source to buy a gun, it can't be shipped to a private party without going to a gun dealer who is then going to do that background check. And that's why that situation comes up.
Okay.
At least that's what I know about those two. Some of the other questions I can't help with any more insight into, but on those I had a little bit of information for you. Other questions by members of the board? Thank you, Mr. Jaskowitz, for your
Thank you.
testimony. I appreciate it. Are there any other folks who wish to testify? I think I saw a gentleman in the back here. Oh, and one over here too. Okay, we'll give you a minute to set up. You guys set your computer up and plug into that little gizmo there, and then we'll get the technicians to fire up the projector for you. Put the screen down and all of that. Yeah, please, let's do that. While you're setting up, perhaps the lady that was sitting next to Mr. Jaskowitz would like to come forward while he's setting up his computer and offer us your input and testimony. And please do also sign in and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Danielle Jaskowitz, and I also live at 16 Whispering Pines Lane. My concerns concern more so his records. How would he be keeping them? Would they just be electronic? How many backups would he have? And also, how would he choose his customers? And he said himself that he only wants about 25 customers or so. But what if it gets more than that? Would he start cutting off customers, saying, no, I can't do this right now? Or would he continue taking on customers and having a surplus of other people's weapons in his house?
Okay. Thank you for those comments. With respect to his records, I certainly will ask the question of him and see what he tells us for that. It's not an area that's one of the criteria that we can decide for a home occupation any more than we would ask a accountant how they keep their accounting records if they wanted to work out of their home. With respect to the customers, the number of customers, the area where we can impact that as a board is by asking him about parking and traffic and hours of operation and the number of employees and that sort of thing. And he's committed to the hours that he's offered up and that he won't have any employees. And we haven't discussed parking yet. We certainly can discuss that with him. And so with respect to this board's authority to impact what it is that he's proposing, those are the areas that we can ask him to correspond with us and commit him to certain things. In terms of him saying, I'm going to have 8 customers a day versus 15 customers a day or something like that, or 1 customer versus 10, that doesn't fall into a criteria that we can look at as a board within our site plan and zoning ordinances.
Okay.
But
Sounds
thank you
good.
for the testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to testify while we're waiting? This gentleman right here in the blue shirt. Well, we're figuring out the technical aspects.
My name is David Praisner. I live at 15 Blair Road. I abut the property.
David, can you say your last name for me again?
Praisner, P-R-E-Y-S-N-A-R.
Thank you.
Okay. Of course, I had a list of some concerns. Most of those concerns have been already brought up by other people here, other residents. A couple of things that weren't, though, was one was parking. I live next door, so there are 4 cars parked in a driveway almost all the time. So any additional vehicles would have to be parked on the street. Second, how much additional traffic is going to be going by that neighborhood? That hasn't been discussed either. I don't know how many customers he can have in a 4-hour period, 5, 10, I don't know. But traffic increased in that residential neighborhood concerns me too. There's a lot of little kids. I got a little granddaughter that rides a bike up and down the street too. So the traffic concerns me. Parking on the street concerns me. The other items, I think most of the other people have covered. I had the same concerns. The other concern I have, and it was already brought up, although the permit or the license is only for, so many hours a day, experience has told me that it's going to increase over time, and he'll probably be back to increase the hours and the days of the business, and we'll be back here again. And it's a residential neighborhood, and I'm going to have to voice my objection to having any type of business in a neighborhood that's just strictly residential. And I do believe, like it was already stated too, property values will go down. I can't imagine somebody wanting to buy my house knowing they have a gun shop next door. So,
When you, can I ask one question just for a little bit of clarification?
sure.
I know that you were opposed to a lot of the same issues that other folks raised related to safety and transferring and
Those were all
selling guns
brought
and all
up.
that
I
stuff.
had those on my list, but I don't want to repeat those again. So,
And I appreciate your consideration for doing that. The question that I have, though, is it seemed like some of the comments later on about parking and traffic suggested you'd be opposed to any kind of home occupation business. And I want to make sure I understood you correctly. Are you opposed to any kind of home occupation business or
No.
this specific one?
no, I'm not just this specific one. Yes.
Okay.
Not any. Okay.
So some of the other kinds of home occupation businesses we see pretty often in town are people that groom dogs.
Groom dogs,
Cut
people
hair.
do paperwork, accounting, bookkeeping, those type
Daycare.
of things, daycare. This one to me doesn't belong in a residential neighborhood.
Okay.
There are safety concerns, and like I said, those things have all been brought up. I don't want to go through them again, but
And those are important concerns to discuss and to understand a little bit better. I was just trying to understand the traffic and the parking because it would seem like those
right
would
now
come
I
from
don't know
any
how
kind of
that's going to
business.
be handled, because I know that the driveway is full most of the time, so that means the parking will have to be on the street.
Okay.
And I don't know the volume of traffic that's going to be coming in and out either. So
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any other board members that have a question for Mr. Praisner? Thank you so much for your testimony. Are you ready to go, Mr. Bevel? Yes. Bevel? With that, please, did you sign in already? And please introduce yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right, good evening. My name is Bob Bevel. I am a butter that lives directly across the street from the subject property, and I am opposed to this application because four reasons. First off, I would like to say that I am a gun owner. I am a lifetime member of Gun Owners of New Hampshire and a registered member of the National Rifle Association. I'm opposed to this for four reasons. First being it is an improper use of the home occupation permit. Second, there is no local or state agency that regularly monitors firearm businesses. The Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms inspects firearm businesses by their own admission only once every 5 to 17 years. This would have a detrimental effect and change the character of the neighborhood, cause a deteriorating effect on other residential properties in the vicinity. And fourth, this would create unnecessary safety concerns, introducing an element of pervasive fear to the neighborhood. Since I know that the board is already familiar with the home occupation definition, I wanted to at least present that to the audience, that in Section 103, number 20, the definition of a home occupation is a non-residential use carried on within a residence or its accessory buildings, which is clearly incidental and secondary to the principal use of the home as a residence and does not change the character thereof. Under Section 202.1, the district R for residential permitted uses, it enumerates each of the home occupations that are recognized by the town. It says home occupation shall be deemed to include professional offices such as that of a doctor, a dentist, lawyer, accountant, engineer, architect, and the business offices of a variety of similar occupations. They shall also include occupations such as dressmaking, cooking limited to items for off-premises consumption, home crafts, hairdressing, and barbering limited to one chair, and family daycare homes. Earlier in the code, it talks about general prohibitions for all districts and specifically says no use of any kind shall be permitted in any district if in any way it would be injurious, noxious, or offensive by way of odor, fumes, smoke, dust, vibrations, noise, light, or other objectionable features, or if it would be hazardous to the community on account of fire, explosion, or any other cause. There are 5 cases that have been decided by the New Hampshire Supreme Court dealing with home occupations. The first being in 1959, Perone versus City of Concord. The Supreme Court held that a roofing contractor was not a recognized profession within the ordinary meaning of the term used in the home occupation ordinance. Quoting from the case, the court says, the plaintiff's resident is situated in a general residential district where permitted uses include use as a dwelling and a use for a customary home occupation such as millinery, that's making dresses, hairdressing, manicuring, laundering, preserving, and home cooking, or the office of a doctor, dentist, musician, teacher, architect, artist, or member of some other recognized profession. That is from the ordinance of Concord. Nor does the plaintiff come with the class of persons expressly permitted by the ordinance to maintain an office in his home. Indeed, the exclusion of substantially all business and industry from residential districts is perhaps one of the most important features of a city's zoning is its broad aspect. If business is to be admitted to such a district, and the court clearly says, there must be a clear showing that the ordinance so provides. In Hancock versus City of Concord, the Supreme Court held that a real estate business was not an accessory use permitted. Again, the sole question in the case is whether the Zoning Board of Adjustment could rule as a matter of law the operation of a real estate business in a general residential district is a customary home occupation within the meaning of the Concord Ordinance, which permits an accessory use, customary home occupation such as hairdressing, laundering, preserving, and home cooking. Mr. Malyer's not going to be making dresses in his home. We hold that the permit was improperly granted. The occupation of a real estate agent has been held to be a business and not a profession. We hold that the operation of a real estate business is not an accessory use, which is customarily incidental to the use of residential premises. Rather, it is a business use for which it is intended to be permitted in a general residential district, and again, the court says, should be clearly provided for in the ordinance, as was hairdressing. The ordinance does not so provide. The flip side is in the Leolis versus Franklin Zoning Board of Adjustments in 1978, where the Supreme Court held that a beauty shop was allowed within the definition of a home occupation. plaintiff, a licensed hairdresser, seeks to open a hairdressing or beauty shop in her Franklin home. The home is in an O1 zone, which under the Franklin zoning ordinance permits accessory uses that are incidental and subordinate to the principal use. The Board of Adjustments found that the hairdressing occupation was a home occupation, but not an accessory use, and was denied by the plaintiff as a use permit. We reverse. Section 608 of the ordinance defines home occupation as activities such as, and enumerated, art studios, dressmaking, or teaching, and if these occupations comply with certain other conditions of the sections, requires that these home occupations be permitted as accessory uses. In the town of Milford versus Batazzi, a little more of a twist happens. The Supreme Court held that an automobile and truck repair business did not come within the definition of a home occupation. Again, the defendant contends that his part-time business is a home occupation and therefore permitted use within the district. We reject this contention and affirm. The definition introduces interpretation overlooks the fact that home occupation is a widely used term in zoning ordinances throughout the county. Examples of this include, again, dressmaking, hairmaking, and tutoring. But then the court says, an automobile or truck repair shop, unlike dressmaking or the practice of the learned professions, is not customarily conducted from a home and changes the character of the neighborhood. And in my final case, Narbonne versus the town of Rye, the Supreme Court held that the evidence supported the determination that the stained glass business was the principal use of the home rather than the subordinate or accessory use of the residence, and thus that it violated the general residency zoning. Again, it's saying the subsection provides as follows. Customary home occupations are millinery, hairdressing, manicuring, laundering, preserving, and home cooking, and the office of a doctor, dentist, musician, and so on, provided that such occupation shall be carried on by a person only within the dwelling used by him or her. Continuing, the plaintiff contends that the stained glass business is permissible under the Rye Zone Ordinance and as an accessory use of the property, or alternatively, that the use falls within the category of customary home occupation as illustrated by the examples in the ordinance. The master found that this was neither due to its commercial character and to its detrimental effects on the residential neighborhood. The master upheld the zoning board's finding of a detrimental effect, stating that from the overall evidence before it, the board could have properly concluded that the commercial or business use of the property had a deteriorating effect on the residential properties in the vicinity. We agree. There are a couple of safety concerns. While it is purported that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is supposed to do at least one safety inspection per year, under its own admission, the ATF did not meet its goal of inspecting all federal firearms licensees, that's what Mr. Mellier is applying for, on a cyclical basis, resulting in over 58% of all FFLs not being inspected within 5 years. Quoting from their own report, we found that the ATF still had not met its goal of inspecting all FFLs on a 3 to 5 year cyclical basis. Between the years of fiscal 2007 and 2012, over 58% of all FFLs had not been inspected for years. As a result, non-compliant FFLs go undetected by ATF for many years.
Tom?
Tell me what an FFL is.
An FFL is what Mr. Mallier has applied for.
Holder of a
It's a
federal
federal firearms licensee. If you sell more than 2 guns in a year, it's someone who is not a relative or a personal friend, you are required to get a license from the federal government to sell that. Another concern is that gun dealers are prime targets for theft, burglary, and loss of property. This is not saying that there would be any kind of untowardness at Mr. Mallier's property. However, it says between 2004 and 2011, FFLs had 174,679 firearms stolen or lost from their inventories, according to the ATF, and that was from their own internal review. The BATF also found that FFLs who violate federal laws are a major source of trafficked arms. In June of 2000, the ATF issued a comprehensive report of firearms trafficking in this country. That report analyzed 1,530 trafficking investigations during the period July 96 through December 98, involving more than 84,000 diverted firearms. Random inspections by ATF have been uncovered that a large percentage of FFLs do violate federal laws and that the percentage is growing. Another concern is once Mr. Mallier is registered with the FFL, his home address will become public and readily available to anyone on the BATF website. These are the 6 licensees registered as of August 2014 in the city of Merrimack. If you'll notice, 3 of those are residential and 3 of those are commercial. So in summation, I have a couple of notes here also. The New Hampshire Supreme Court has repeatedly stated its interpretation of the home occupation classification. I could not find any reference to firearms in any code as a home occupation in any jurisdiction. The application for a home-based gun business clearly does not fall within the definition or the spirit of the home occupation classification. There is a severe lack of regulation and oversight of the firearms business, unlike those professions requiring licensing by state boards, such as dentistry and doctors and real estate people. Gun dealers are prime targets of theft, burglary, and loss of property. A home-based business would bring an unnecessary hazard to the community. An element of fear would begin to pervade the neighborhood for stay-at-home moms, small children, and the elderly. A home-based gun business would have a deteriorating effect, a detrimental effect, and change the character of the neighborhood, causing a deteriorating effect on the residential properties in the vicinity. As to some of the questions asked of Mr. Melior, I can say that if this license is granted, it falls under the jurisdiction at that point of New Hampshire RSA 159.26, which says that only the state has the authority to regulate the business once you've granted it a zoning approval. And it also says, as of 2005, that any municipal ordinances trying to regulate that shall be null and void. However, the town still has the ability to block this business because it says, nothing in this section shall be construed as affecting a political subdivision's right to adopt zoning ordinances for the purposes of regulating firearms or knife businesses in the same manner as any other business, or to take action allowed under RSA 207.59. Mr. Melior can promise that he's not going to do sales, but once he walks out this door with your permission and there's a seal put on that gun license, then he will get his approval from the FFL, and then he can sell guns out of his house anytime he wants to. And the law requires that he sell it out of his house or at a gun show, and he can't sell it, make transactions at another gun business. As to one concern that I wanted to bring to the board, the only people who are notified were the abutters, the 7 properties that are doing so, and I was the one who notified my neighbors because I thought this needed to be addressed. This was not a dog grooming business. This was not somebody making pies or doing some other kind of business out of their home. I felt like that was a very strong concern because of our neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bevel. It's a very in-depth and very well-researched presentation. I compliment you on the effort. We don't often get to enjoy such a detailed and researched presentation from abutters. Are there questions by members of the board for Mr. Bevel?
Could I ask the same question of you, sir, that I asked of one of the other citizens? You kindly stated that you do have guns. Do you have an alarm on your house?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Thank you. And you do have a gun safe?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments or questions, Mr. Bevel? Anything else that you'd like to add for our review?
No, I thank you for your attention.
And let me also note that Mr. Bevel has been kind enough to supply the substance of his presentation in a lengthy document for the board to consider with all of that detail as well. So we've got it in writing as well as what we watched.
Thank you very much.
I did look at
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, the time it went in to put that together. Are there other citizens or abutters who wish to weigh in? See a hand all the way in the back here. Come on forward. I'm sorry, I saw your hand before too. I'll get you next. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you want the board to know.
Good evening. My name is Frank Ventry. I'm representing Catherine LaRocca, who's my mother-in-law, who resides at 25 Brenda Lane. I just want to state that I appreciate all the folks that went before me, and my mother-in-law and I discussed this before coming. We respect the fact of individual gun ownership, but there are 2 main topics that folks have been kind of honing in on the whole evening. One is definitely the devalue of property with this type of business going on in this residential neighborhood. and two, the fact of increased traffic and different folks coming into the neighborhood. And I could speak specifically because I live in a neighborhood where this type of license was granted some time ago, and we saw an increase of different type of traffic coming into the neighborhood. And as time built up, that traffic built to the point where that individual had to take his business and move it elsewhere, out of the neighborhood and into a normal, commercial type zoning type business. So I believe the value of the property will be devalued with this type of business. And two, the fact that in the neighborhood there will be increased traffic, which is already, my knowledge, we abut the gentleman's property, and there's quite a bit of traffic already for other types of stuff going on. I don't know how we would take this influx of business coming in. And again, I respect the fact of, gun ownership. I was in the military for 8 years, so I understand that. But I do not believe it behooves these folks in this neighborhood to bring a business like this into that type of setting.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions by members of the board for Mr. Ventry? Was your
Yes.
name? Ventry. Questions or comments? Thank you for your testimony, particularly in regard to your, oh, I'm sorry. No, sir.
Just one question. This neighborhood that was affected, as you say, is that in Merrimack?
Yes, it is.
Could you tell us where it is?
Wendover Landing. So it's a good, the neighborhood is, good. We moved into the neighborhood all around the same time. We built the homes all around the same time. The gentleman moved in after we built our homes. Very good guy. Matter of fact, we're friends with him. He brought the business in, did a very good job. But what happened was, as other folks has testified this evening, the business got to a point where it overwhelmed the infrastructure, okay? And I believe, and I don't know for a fact, you guys would have to look into it, he then took the business elsewhere and went commercial with it. And the business is growing. It's Merrimack Firearms right now, so it's on Route 3 now. So he did well for himself, but again, while that transition occurred, it inconvenienced us. And again, you were bringing different elements into the neighborhood, as other folks have stated here. And to be honest, in this day and age, you want to minimize that kind of stuff in a residential area. I don't believe this gentleman would do anything harmful, but it's the statistics of how you could get, accessible to these items once you understand that these items exist in these residential homes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ventry. Yes, this gentleman here with the green shirt. I've passed you over a couple of times inadvertently.
My name is George Fitch, and I live at 3 Brenda Lane. And I would like to comment on the presentation of the court cases and regulations. I've come to the conclusion that the things that the state does allow are personal services. There's no hardwood goods and services involved in these things, such as hairdressers or professional people or anything like that. With this type of business, you are hardware involved. You're taking hardware into your home, you're receiving hardware through some shipping company. And I think that's a different character business than what the courts have addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Fitch. I was observing and almost sort of trying to decide if there was that distinction as well. But I think some of the things like dressmaking and cooking, although obviously are different products, which don't have the safety characteristics of this, are still producing a product for sale. Craft making, I think, was one of the things on the list, which is producing a product for sale. So I was trying to see if there was that same kind of distinction, and I don't know if I came to the same conclusion that you did after thinking about it. But are there comments or questions by members of the board for Mr. Fitch? Thank you so much. So, gentleman over here raised his hand. Please come forward.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Scott Cush, 7 Dodier Court in the same neighborhood. One of the parents that showed up, I have 4 children, 8, 5, and twin 4-year-olds. Moved to the neighborhood, beautiful, nice little neighborhood. I am definitely concerned about the safety Within the last couple of years, I mean, my 5-year-old daughter has showed up home and said, you know, Daddy, we had lockdown day today at school. It's a whole different world we're living in. I don't remember having lockdown day. I remember climbing under the desk when there was a tornado drill. I think it's in our, we need to empower ourselves to protect our children. And by doing something like this, it's something, we can't predict the future, but we can prevent things from happening. The lack of alarms worries me. Conflicting messages regarding I'm not going to sell, but being able to sell, that worries me. Not advertising is a little bit of a worry because I do work in the internet business, and the minute you list a business, Google will find you. And if Google can find you, then people that may want to break in can find you as well, especially in a residential area. You become a target immediately. Getting shipped from one dealer to another dealer, I'm not going to be sure what happens if the gentleman, I forgot his name, Mr. Meliar, isn't home if he's working at Easter Propane, and who will sign for it? Will he have a pre-signed? Will they leave packages on his door? That's a little bit concerning if he's the only one running the business as well. The business plan just doesn't sound well thought out from a safety standpoint. I think I'm not as concerned about property values, obviously having the young children and being in it for the long term. I'm just more concerned from a safety issue, and that it could bring in the wrong element. Bringing in the wrong element from a traffic standpoint is less concerning. All it takes is one time, and I'm more concerned from a safety standpoint.
Thank you, Mr. Cush. Are there questions by any member of the board for Mr. Cush? Thank you so much for your testimony.
Sure.
Are there other members of the public who wish to weigh in? This gentleman back here.
My name is Eric Hanscom. I'm at 5 Dodia Court. I've lived there for 9 years, and we have 2 young boys. They are 11 and 12, and I'm not so worried so much of, certainly there's no malintent with the business itself. I'm concerned of what you may not necessarily expect or can anticipate. It seems to be, you know, it could be very a good business for the neighborhood, but you're never going to be able to anticipate what may or who may come under the driveway. Even if it takes one person to hurt any child in that neighborhood, it would not be anything that the board should not consider. Some comments have been made regarding changes in the character of the neighborhood, and questions come to mind with, how do you define that? And I would easily define it as, it changes my neighborhood because I live there. I would be worried about my kids growing up there. I also would be worried with, as time goes on, how the neighborhood may also change, and how the element and how this business may also change. At this point, we're talking about a small business, but there's no indication whether this business will remain small and will remain innocent. Right now, there's discussions that there won't be any kind of ammunition with the guns being on property. However, there's nothing to say that anyone who is either to pick up a gun or drop off a gun or anything like that won't be bringing in ammunition with them. I have concerns with, even with the hours that would be available, that those hours may not certainly be convenient for those who are interested in using that business, and whether or not it may be something that would be dropping off a gun or anything like that would be something that would fit into a convenient schedule of 4 hours on a Saturday or hours in the evening during the week. The other concern that I had was in terms of limits. He has concerns or mentioned that he'd be cleaning specific guns. But I have concerns, are there any limits on the types of guns that either could be used for transfer or for cleaning. And it may sound innocent to be cleaning a pistol or maybe cleaning a shotgun, but there's, you know, are there any restrictions on any additional guns that could be of greater danger, certainly in the wrong hands? So, you know, I have, the biggest concern is certainly the safety of the neighborhood, and that it is a neighborhood of children, very young children, who constantly are in the streets, riding their bikes, going for walks. I can't tell you how many people walk by my house every day with just going for a walk and walking their dogs. I can tell you because I have 2 golden retrievers who let me know when there's anyone in front of my street, whether it be a dog or anyone else. So my primary concerns are certainly the safety of my kids, the kids in the neighborhood, but also the character of the neighborhood itself. I couldn't probably emphasize enough the fact that the neighborhood would change, because it would certainly change for me. And I'm several streets away. I have the 2 kids, the 2 boys, that I would be concerned about. Where are they? You know, are they on that street? Would it be possible for my boys to be riding their bikes and someone, whether it be coming up unexpectedly to drop off a gun, you know, would it be something that would be danger to my children? I just don't feel it's a business that's that belongs in a neighborhood of children or of residents of our neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Hanscom. Are there questions by members of the board for Mr. Hanscom?
Could I, I'm not trying to belittle your concerns, because I can understand your concerns for your children and anybody else's children playing in the street. But surely Mr. Mallier's business is no different from Mrs. Smith, who opens a hairdressing business 3 doors down, who's going to have the same number of people coming, ladies coming to have their hair done. The risk to your children from cars, inattentive drivers, is surely the same. I'm not belittling what you're saying. I'm just asking you, do you define it because it's guns that's worrying you, or because it's additional people coming into the neighborhood that's worrying you? So if we permitted a hairdressing business, would you have the same concerns?
Are you asking me if I'm concerned about a hairdressing?
Say somebody was before us asking to put in a hairdressing business. The concerns you expressed seem to reflect about people who don't belong in the neighborhood coming to the neighborhood, which would be the same for any home occupation, not just guns.
I guess I'd answer the question. I'm more concerned about the elements of the weapons being in the neighborhood. And also, there's nothing to say that the people who are coming into the neighborhood do not bring ammunition with them.
Thank you. That's what I wanted you to define for me. Thank you so much.
Any other questions from Ms. Hanscom? Tom? No? I saw another hand go back up here. Now, before you testify a second time, let me make sure everybody's had a chance to go once. Are there any other folks who haven't? I see another hand over here in the back. Please take the time to sign in and get settled. And when you're ready, let us know what input you'd like to offer for us.
Hello, my name is Jan Bevel. I live at 12 Blair Road.
Can you get closer to the microphone, my dear, because they won't hear you at home. We can hear you, but they won't.
Actually, I can barely. So.
I turn the hearing up.
My name is Jan Bevel.
Much better, thank you.
I live at 12 Blair Road. I've lived there 18 years. My property abuts Mr. Mallier's. You have not heard from the Mad Mom yet. This is incredible. This is a wonderful neighborhood. I raised 2 other children who are now in college. Wonderful school system. Couldn't say enough great things about that and their upbringing. It was wonderful. Now, my youngest, my 6-year-old, who's going to be going to 1st grade, is going to be standing, if you pass this, in front of a gun shop to catch the school bus this fall, along with 2 other 6-year-olds who abut the property. This is a nightmare. I can't believe that anybody would think this is okay. Have you forgotten about Sandy Hook already? This is very emotional. These people have been very calm and very polite about a very serious subject that made people cry a year ago. I was afraid to even put my 6-year-old into kindergarten. I was the one that took the longest to turn in her paperwork. They already had kindergarten orientation before I turned mine in because I was scared. And now I have to consider that this is going to be across the street from me when a year ago I was saying, thank God it wasn't at my little school. Thank God it wasn't in my neighborhood that all those children died. And I realize my neighbor is talking about something benign like cleaning, like he's doing home repairs. But this could become something else if the wrong person comes to my neighborhood, and because of the internet, I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know anything about them. They're an unknown, and they are pretty scary, whoever they are. And Massachusetts is not that far away, and they have strict gun control. So why not come to New Hampshire? Why not cross into Merrimack? Why not take advantage of somebody that doesn't have the police patrolling their business? There is no neon sign either, by the way, at the Mailer home. And for all I know, they're going to be knocking at my door across the street if they go to the wrong house looking for Mr. Mailer's business. And I would also like to add that I don't want to be at home alone when somebody comes to break into his house. I don't want him coming to my house. This is another concern. My number one concern, though, at this point would be the 6-year-olds and also my other children who are in the upper elementary school and in the middle school in Merrimack. I can't believe that we spent this much time on it. This is awful. This is a nightmare. And I just hope and pray that you don't pass this. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bevel. Are there questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify that hasn't testified already? All right, gentleman that wanted to testify again, you want to come forward? Please reintroduce yourself.
Yep, Frank Ventry, on behalf of my mother-in-law, Catherine LaRocca, on 25 Brenda Lane. I'd like to address the question that this gentleman asked. For me, the distinction is quite clear. The business that we're proposing here would have an element that you wouldn't have with hairdressing, okay?
Can I just explain, is that the way the gentleman spoke, he was emphasizing things like traffic and strangers, and I just wanted to have him clarify for me that was what he was he was worried about, the element of what it was, not just people coming down the street.
So for me, clarification on two things. One, yes, there'll be increased traffic in the neighborhood, and two, as a bunch of folks have testified here, based on the type of business it is, you would be bringing in different types of folks into the neighborhood. I just wanted to be very clear on that.
I just thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Ventry.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to testify before we close public hearing? Going once, going twice, close the public hearing. Mr. Mailer, can you come back up forward, please? Mr. Mailer, I want to leave you with an opportunity to respond to any of the comments that you heard from your neighbors, if you'd like to. You don't have to.
And one thing that I would like to say is that they keep talking about a different element that would be coming into our neighborhood. And quite a few of these people have admitted that they are gun owners. So that means that they would be coming into our neighborhood. I'm not looking to be doing anything illegal or whatever. I'm here legally to try to, do what I can. The presentation that Bob Bevel gave was really great, but in part of that, it also did say that there were other occupations that were allowed in the wording, with the home care and, all that. And Mr. Bevel also, I had to fill out all those forms for the town to be sent out, and he went and mimeographed all those copies and brought them to every neighborhood, every neighbor in our neighborhood, and stuck them in their mailbox, which is blatantly against the law. You can't be using the mailbox for your own personal mail. They belong to the post office.
Let's don't comment on those issues, because first of all, we don't know about those in terms of what actually happened, and we don't have any jurisdiction over them anyway, so I don't want you to testify in ways
No,
that
but
are just potentially disparaging of anybody else. So let's focus on the issues related to your application.
I'm here to do, what's right and doing something honest, and I'm not here doing something, trying to do something dishonest. And that's all I'd like to say, is that that's why I'm here, trying to do this legally, not, going behind anybody's back or, anything else. I'm here on the up and up, trying to do what I feel that I could do.
Thank you, Mr. Mailer.
Can I ask a question? Because one of the people made a point. And you clarified it, the guns have to be delivered dealer to dealer. When UPS and/or the post office deliver, and you may know, but do you have to sign for them? Can they deliver them and leave the parcel on your door?
They have to be picked up and
You
signed
actually
for.
have to sign
Yes.
the piece of paper.
Yes.
They cannot leave it at the door.
They cannot leave it at the door. The FFL dealer has to be the one that's picking it up.
Thank you. Just a question I did.
Got a question to that.
Desiree.
Do you see that you're gonna have an issue with the timing, considering when UPS, FedEx does their deliveries, 5 to 8 on Monday through Friday, and then just Saturday, 12 to 4, like being able to catch your packages in time in that business window?
What they do is they would leave me a notice showing that the package has arrived, and then I would have to go retrieve it
From the facility, okay.
from their facility, whether it be UPS, Postal Service, or FedEx.
Talk to me briefly about, before I call on you, Lynn, the traffic and the parking, the issues with some of the neighbors that say that your driveway's big enough for 4 cars. There's usually 4 cars in it. Is that the case, or?
I have 3 cars. One of them is in the garage. My personal pickup and my wife's car are outside the garage, and then I have at least 6 more spaces in the driveway.
Okay. Lynn?
I just drew a blank. It'll come back to me.
Okay. Other comments or questions by members of the board? Now you got it again?
Now I got it. The question was raised regarding cabinets versus safes. Can you elaborate on that with your situation?
There are 3 gun cabinets. I purchased them at Dick's. They're made to store, firearms in. I have the only keys. They're with me 24/7.
Can I take a crowbar and break into it?
Yep.
Okay.
You could also use a saw or any other tool that's down in my basement.
Can I do the same with a gun safe?
Yes. Every piece of equipment that I have at my workbench, you can break in anywhere. Obviously, it's going to take them a while to get, into it. It's not like a file cabinet that you have. These are rugged steel cabinets that are made for guns.
No, my question was, and I believe I know the answer because I'm aware someone has one. A gun safe is different from a cabinet.
These are heavy-duty gun cabinets.
And a gun safe cannot be broken into with a crowbar.
I'd get into it. If I wanted to get into that safe, I could get into it.
Okay.
Other comments or questions? Tom?
There's been several comments about alarm systems and concerns about security and whatnot. Have you put any consideration into increasing security?
Me and my wife have been talking about having Xfinity come in to do the in-home security system with the cameras and such. I'm just taking this one, step at a time. I want to get approved for what I plan on doing and, to upgrade for everything that I need to do in the home to make it proper.
if it was part of our consideration or our condition of our approval that you move ahead with that plan to get that alarm system put in, would you be willing to do that?
Right tomorrow.
Desiree, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, just one thing to the effect of, you're going to be storing other people's firearms on site. Are you going to have insurance to cover the firearms?
Yes.
Is that part of the requirement from the ATF for approval, or is that just?
The ATF doesn't have anything to do with it. I was just doing it for my own personal.
Liability?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Is your insurer going to know that you're operating a business, or is sure that going to know that you just have some guns in your house as an owner?
No, they're gonna know that what I'm doing.
Okay. Do you plan to incorporate your business, or just do this in your own personal
I'm
name?
just doing it in a personal.
Okay. If you're obtaining insurance and letting the insurance company know what it is your plans for your business, would you be willing to provide a copy of your insurance certificate as a part of a condition of approval?
Yes.
Nelson?
Just one question. Would you clarify a little bit about the expected traffic? I think we had some comments on it and some concerns from the neighbors regarding the number of cars per day and so on, and then whether or not, if you're not there, will people come, and if you are there, how many people are you anticipating?
I'm
with
not
this?
anticipating very many. I'm looking for a very small clientele, 20, 25 people at most. The busiest time that I find that it would be during hunting season. Nobody's going to be coming in the neighborhood without having an appointment. I'm not going to have anybody just walking in my door. I don't feel that I'm going to have any more traffic in the neighborhood than is there now.
Well, could you quantify that? Could you,
If I had-
number of visitors expected per Saturday
I
afternoon?
really don't have a clue right this second, only because I'm not in the business. I don't know.
If I can clarify for the board, in Mr. Maliar's application, under the how many customers and clients do you expect will visit the property each day, it's one or less on the application.
One
I
per
mean, I'm
day.
not-
Yes.
One or less per day?
One or
Yeah,
less
I'm
per-
not looking on having somebody drop off 50 guns. I want to do one gun at a time for one client,
Is the one per day an accurate number, you think?
or less.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't think I'd have 365,
No,
clients
yeah.
coming in.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Other comments or questions before board deliberates? Mr. Bevel, I do see your hand up, and but we've closed the public hearing portion. Public hearing portion is closed. Do you have other comments or questions by members of the board for Mr. Maliar? Tom?
Can you talk to the concept that's been brought up here that FLLs or you're having a home occupation might encourage burglaries or become a target, that you might be a target bigger than anybody else in the neighborhood?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, we went through a rash of vandalism in our neighborhood about maybe 15 years ago, which Mr. Bevel himself had his windows smashed quite a few times from kids in the neighborhood. Nobody ever touched my house.
Okay, so you have no
there-
reason to believe that there
No.
might be any increase in activity or interest?
No.
Because of your activities as a
No.
home occupation? Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Stanley?
Yeah, just a comment. We were talking about traffic, and I really can't see any increase in traffic because the applicant is telling me that he's only going to have people stop by the house by appointment. And you wouldn't be making more than 2 appointments a day. And that's in 5 to 8 p.m. So I don't really see that there could be a lot of increase in traffic. That's just a comment.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? All right. We will, not really an official period to allow Mr. Mailer to testify, but let's see what the board has in its mind for deliberations.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask Mr. Thompson, Mr. Bevel made a statement of saying that unlike other home occupations, once Mr. Mallard's been given an approval, he can do what he likes because the rules for firearms dealers are different from anybody else. Because if somebody comes here with a hairdressing business and wants to go from one chair to two, they have to come back here, or different hours. We have a chance to, they have to come back to us. Mr. Bevel suggested that doesn't apply to firearms dealers. Did you know this to be the case?
I am not aware of that. I'm not aware of that. It's not something that, in my profession, I typically need to worry about.
I understand that, but you can understand my concern.
Certainly.
I mean, normally, if somebody has a home occupation, we've got the ability to ask them to come back if they want to change the terms. Mr. Bevel's implied that was not the case for firearms, and that is a worrying feature to me.
My only experience and understanding is with the statute regarding treating the firearms dealers in terms of ordinance considerations, that you can't treat them differently than you would similar types of operations. So in this case, I would basically make the same statement that we're treating this as a home occupation. It would be treated as any other home occupation, where if there are modifications, they would have to be required to come back to the board. If that's something the board wants me to confer with legal counsel on, it's certainly something that we can do, but I certainly am not in a position to answer that question tonight.
My understanding is similar to what you're suggesting, and that is that the town doesn't have the authority to independently regulate gun dealerships as a line of business in town here or anywhere else, whether it's a home occupation or anywhere else. Nevertheless, a home occupation is a home occupation, and it's subject to conditions of approval as would any other business be.
Thank you. I just picked up on it.
Like,
Tim, I have another question, it's kind of on the idea of defining this occupation. You know, I think that the home occupation limits the use of like small engine repair. And so that makes me think, okay, he described a little bit of his activities as kind of being repair, and using the chemicals to do that those can be very toxic chemicals. We don't have any sort of regulation that would define necessarily how much he could use, because it's presumed that the types of businesses would be in an industrial setting that would have the right elements to do that. Where does this type of application fall in that understanding with regards to its similarities to like a small engine repair?
I don't have an answer for that question, to be honest with you. It's the chemicals and things that I understand are used in the cleaning of the firearms are things that are commercially available, that anyone could go and buy at a sporting goods store and do at their own home if they so chose to do so.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with fixing your own lawnmower. It's the volume that I think that the ordinance speaks to that we're trying to prevent
And I
folks
think
doing.
when you're talking about small engine repair, auto repair, and those types of business, there's typically an external evidence issue when you get into those types of things as home occupations. It's kind of hard to have an auto repair business or small engine repair business that takes place without people knowing in the neighborhood, looking at the home. You can pretty much tell that there's something going on there that's a business use or a home occupation use, whereas the types of home occupations we typically see, in this case where there's no signage, everything's taking place within the side of the home, a person driving by the home typically would not be able to distinguish it and know that there's a business going on there unless they knew what happened here at tonight's meeting.
I think that's been what I've observed with the small engine specifically. There's been a couple of those that I've seen around town, and they litter the lawn with lawnmowers under tarps. And that's what begins to affect the neighbors and the neighborhood, as it starts to look like a junkyard. More than whether there's chemicals, although I'm sure you'd worry about lawnmowers spilling oil and that sort of thing. I don't know if you couldn't figure out a way to regulate that in a home environment effectively. It's really about the fact that it gathers up a bunch of broken down lawnmowers in the yard. My thought, anyway.
Yeah.
Nelson?
I had nothing at this time.
Okay. Other comments or questions?
Going along that same line, I think you could compare it to somebody who was going to be doing DVD repairs or camera repairs or even leaf blower repairs. Those are small repairs that would be done. You wouldn't necessarily see evidence of any of the things being repaired outside the home, so they could also be in the home. So I would equate it with something similar to that, which I haven't heard that that's necessarily an allowed activity.
And allowed or an unallowed?
I haven't heard that it is allowed.
To do camera repair?
Or not allowed. With some of Mr. Bevel's presentation with this concept of what is allowed as a home occupation and what isn't, and what's the definition of a home occupation, I think that's an important consideration for the board to kind of decide and weigh on and take a look at. I know that we've heard and had other cases with the gun dealers, not repairing guns, but actually selling guns around town. There's 3 of them on the list of licenses, and I can remember hearing 2 of them. And so it's certainly been our practice in the past to treat them as a profession that's eligible for home occupation.
Just to follow up on that, that was the basis for the Planning and Zoning Administrator's determination that this did qualify as a home occupation based on those previous decisions.
Okay. And that being the case, that there's a determination by the Planning and Zoning Administrator, we don't have jurisdiction as a planning board to overrule that. That's a zoning issue. If there's some relief from a determination that it's eligible for a home occupation. But that said, I also observed that a federal firearms license is a personal license that belongs to Mr. Mailer, and that's an element or a similarity to a recognized profession. It's not a business that can operate without him being there. And that's my thought with respect to that element or that consideration of whether or not this is eligible to be a home occupation. Does anyone have comments on that or other issues?
I love the way you said that, but I don't know how to interpret your final statement.
Well, I guess I'm comparing it to the case that's dealing with an auto shop. Now, when you have an auto shop, even if you could hide it well, that's not a business that's dependent on a single licensed person to operate. It's not a recognized profession in the way that practicing law or accounting or being a beautician or a dog groomer or a gunsmith might be. But when you have a license that's specific to an individual person, the business doesn't exist as a separate entity. In fact, he said he wasn't going to incorporate it. But even if he was going to incorporate it, because I think some of the others have, the business exists by virtue of having a licensed individual that's capable of carrying it on, the same way a law practice or an accounting practice were. And to me, that makes it more similar to those identified professions and less similar to some of the things that weren't professions, like a roofing contractor, real estate business, or an auto shop. I think the roofing contractor is the easiest one to distinguish because you don't do roofing at your home. You just store stuff at your home, which is obviously noticeable to the neighborhood and a big impact on the neighborhood. Lynn?
To that specific case, they have said a real estate agent is not an allowed business in a residential area, and a real estate agent, the business does not exist unless that person is licensed. So that contradicts that right there.
Definitely has.
On the other hand, I guess I read that a real estate agent doesn't do their business in their home. They do their business at other homes where they're trying to sell those properties. They might meet in their home, they might discuss and things of that nature, but in general, their activity is to sell another house, not their own house, over and over and over again. And the same thing with many other things that were brought up like that the activity is outside of the home. The roofer contractor goes somewhere else to do his work, and things of that nature. And so I saw a real estate agent is going elsewhere to do their job too.
A lot of the real estate agent's job is doing a lot of research, which is done online.
If I can follow up on the Concord case that is cited there from 1971, having served on Concord Zoning Board of Adjustment in the late 90s and early 2000s, Concord zoning ordinance now does specifically list real estate businesses as eligible for home occupations.
I think that we might consider doing that too if we ever had it, because I couldn't think of a reason why you couldn't do real estate out of your home. But Mike?
I would just make the point that I think that the activity is industrial enough that it's going to leave residues and chemicals behind that are in a residential dwelling. So if that house gets sold, it's in that, you know, it's part of that next phase of ownership, where if it's an industrial or commercial entity, then it's expected, and that would be handled as part of the sale and you say decontaminated. So I feel like the use is heavy for the application in the sense of a residential community.
Thank you. Stan?
We get a lot of paperwork with this application, and some of it, I think, is just excessive, and from what the applicant wants to do. He had to go to the police department and get an application made out a license to sell pistols and revolvers. He doesn't want to sell pistols and revolvers. His application always says there won't be any racks or displays, cases, for sales. He's mainly maintenance. He had to go to the state and get approved, and his house had to be checked out. Nobody said anything bad about that. Listening to the neighbors, I'm afraid to drive down that street. There's more guns there than I ever knew about. So I just, my own thoughts are that it's not selling, it's a little maintenance, part-time job, and I think that there are many little part-time jobs in town that people do out of their house, and that's basically it. That's what I'm thinking of.
Well, you brought up a point with safety that I thought was important as well, and that is the State Department of Safety, our chief of police, and our town manager have already put a signature on these things. And as it relates to safety, I certainly have all the utmost confidence that they know more about it than I do. That the ATF has looked at his gun cabinet and decided whether it's different than a safe or otherwise, whether you could crowbar your way into it. The ATF has decided that it's sufficient for what he's got going on. And I have a hard time figuring out what the basis would be for me to second guess those authorities. I know Chief Doyle, I know some of these other folks that are involved in this. It's hard not to respect their authority on the issues of safety with the guns. Lynn?
I just asked the question of my source, and they said, I asked specifically if you could break into a cabinet or into a gun safe with a crowbar, and they said, a gun cabinet, yes, it's very easy. A gun safe, no, you cannot.
That's my view.
So I would, if we were going to approve this, that would be a condition that I would make on this.
That you'd want to have a safe and not a cabinet?
Not a cabinet.
And an alarm system.
Other thoughts or comments?
Talking about a safe or a cabinet, I would have to, if you want to be specific, I would have to look at them. If the bolt made of steel, where it has to be, okay. When you talk of cabinets, you talk about kitchen cabinets and they're made of wood. The applicant said, I thought he said his cabinet that he holds his gun is made of iron or steel.
Yep.
So I think we should clarify the definition of a cabinet and a gun safe. Yeah, you can go down to the Commons and you can look at them. I don't know what they are. They're 5 feet high, they hold rifles, they have all kinds of stuff. Is it a safe or a cabinet? It's metal. And that's all I'll say. We have to know from some of the thoughts and the shaking of the heads, automatically a cabinet isn't any good. In your source, I don't know. I will just say that they look awful much the same to me. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Desiree?
Just a question. I pointed to Lynn. You were saying that from your source, the difference between them. Do you know if there's an agency that inspects the difference between it? Because I know from personal experience, we've spent a lot of time on YouTube watching people break into cabinets to figure out which ones are the most sturdiest. It has to do with locking mechanisms. It has to do with the gauge of the steel, the hinges. I mean, there's a lot of layers to it. So I would think that, and I personally haven't seen that there's like a stamp that says, hey, this is going to meet it. So I don't know how you regulate that.
I'm not sure how you create a difference either, but I think more important than that, and I like the idea of a safe, but because I would have more confidence in it. On the other side of the coin, I don't know how I come above the ATF and the police chief and say something that they've signed off on needs a higher level of security because the planning board says so. Also, I brought with me, and I had a chance to look at this, I had a chance to have Mr. Bevel's presentation ahead of the meeting today. And the statistics about targeting gun dealers or federal firearms folks for crime really struck me, and I wanted to know more about that because I think it was 127,000 lost and stolen guns from federal firearms licenses, and I wanted to know more about that. And what I found when I looked into that is that statistic is spread over about 8 years, 5 years, or 6 years, something like that. And so it's also a nationwide statistic. The other piece of the statistic is that it measures unaccounted for guns. Whether unaccounted for is stolen in a part of a crime or not is a different characteristic. And in trying to figure out all of those things, one of the things I came across is the United States Department of Justice, ATF's Firearms Reported Lost and Stolen for 2012 summary, and they identified by state. And in New Hampshire, for the whole state, not federal firearms licenses, 435 guns lost or stolen or unaccounted for, 426 identified as part of a theft. The ones that relate to federal firearms licenses were 7 guns out of that number. And when you look a little bit deeper, of those 7, 3 of them were identified as larceny, which means a theft by an employee or an internal. 4 guns were related to actual burglaries, which occurred in 2 burglaries with 4 guns. And so in all of 2012, you boil down to 2 burglaries of federal firearms licensees in New Hampshire, according to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And as I looked at that number, and this is only 1 year, and it may go up and down from different years, it didn't strike me that a federal firearms licensee is a particularly attractive target to criminals. It doesn't appear to be the case when you dig down into the numbers a little bit. Other comments or questions? What's the will of the board in terms of how you want to dispose of the proposed application? Stanley?
To move it along, I'll make a motion that we allow the applicant his proposed home occupation.
Do you wish to propose conditions with your proposal to approve the application?
I'd like to leave it open until I hear from the rest of the board what they might want to do.
Okay. Is there a second for Stan's motion?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Fault. Are there any, in the form of discussion, is there anyone that wants to talk about potential conditions of approval?
I'd like to see the insurance certificate attached to it. We talked about, they provide proof of insurance. And I don't know how to I don't know how to say that the safe provide that it meets the safe requirement as opposed to a cabinet, so I don't know how to
gun
say.
safer instead of a cabinet. I don't know how to, I mean, I would, it's like, you know it when you look at it.
They're identified as gun cabinets or as gun safes.
So provide documentation that it's a gun safe for the storage of
As
these
opposed to
firearms.
cabinets.
Yeah.
As opposed
And
to
then
a
I would
cabinet.
like that added.
And are we adding the alarm?
Yes, sorry, yes, an alarm on site, yeah.
So that's imposing 3 conditions. Are there other
Yeah.
conditions for discussion? Mike?
I would pose the all flammables are stored in the flammables cabinet.
Okay.
That all waste be disposed of properly in accordance with state and federal hazardous and solid waste rules, and that there's no discharge of liquids to the on-site septic.
Okay.
No ammunition.
No ammunition? He's testified that he won't have other than his own personal,
Okay.
with his own guns.
Well, I'd like to talk about what Mike is proposing. To clean a gun, I don't know, maybe you have a can of oil and a few patches and you shove it in and clean it up. I don't think that there's really a chemical issue with the cleaning of guns.
But if he gets into other aspects of bluing or other things that might be allowed?
Well, I'm thinking of how many gun people we have just in this room, and I'm wondering what they have for, to take care of their wasted patches and oil. And that's all. And just to go back on what the chairman has said, I don't know if I want to take on the police chief and the state that approved this and said it was okay, and then we say, no, it isn't.
Well, I mean, I think that we have the opportunity as a planning board to consider the planning issues that are related to this, and the safety issues, I think are a little bit different. With respect to bluing, I do want to make that very clear, because the applicant testified he doesn't intend to do that, and if it's the applicant's contention that he's not going to sell guns, he's not going to do the bluing guns, he's not going to have ammunition on site, all of those things become conditions of approval that he's obligated to stick to. Tim, am I understanding that correctly? Other comments?
One other item you want to add is town council final approval of the license.
Town council final approval license. So with all of that, let's clean this up a little bit in terms of who made a motion and whether you're willing to include those conditions in the motion, and who seconded the motion.
Desiree seconded.
Yeah, I know Desiree did, but I mean, whether she accepts those.
I made the motion, and I would accept all the conditions that we talked about.
Okay,
To my original motion.
including the condition that Mike suggested with the flammables cabinet?
I think it's unnecessary, but just to get this through, yes.
Are you willing, as a seconder of the motion, to conclude all those conditions?
Yes.
The alarm was one of those. Yeah. Mike, Tom?
I just wanted a clarification. The condition about gun safes, did that extend to his own personal
Yes.
guns and everything,
Yes.
as well as
I would think so.
equipment
I
that would
don't
come in
believe you
for his
could do
business?
that.
I'm not sure we can reach
No.
his personal weapons.
Well, that's what I wanted to make sure I understood, and that everybody that
It
was
would have to
voting
be,
on this.
the board is deciding purely on the home occupation, not his personal use of firearms within the home. That would be an overreach and get you into trouble.
I think that that's the correct interpretation. So conditions include the alarm.
Let me go
flammable
down
safe.
through my lists, because
Okay.
I'm the one that's gonna have to determine what this notice of decision looks like if this motion passes. First is a copy of the insurance certificate to the Community Development Department, the documentation that gun safes are used in place of gun cabinets, alarm system to be installed, flammables to be stored in a flammables cabinet, disposal of any chemicals in accordance with state requirements, no ammunition to be on site, and town council final approval of the license.
Mike?
No discharge of liquids to the on-site septic that pertain to the cleaning of guns.
So does that have to be hazardous liquids, or?
Yeah, well, nasties.
How do you define, I mean, if he washes this, a trigger or something like that with water, has he got to collect that water and keep it because it might have touched guns or oil or something like that?
It
Is
would
that
be
what you-
inappropriate to discharge oil to your on-site septic regardless.
I don't know, do you have an on-site septic system, or you have town sewer?
No, I have septic.
Septic, yeah.
I don't have a sink down there anyway.
I have a question for Tim. What was the second item you mentioned on your list?
That the applicant document that gun safes would be used in lieu of gun cabinets for the storage of the material, of the business.
Did we talk about that
That
and
was
add it to
the
be
second
put in?
condition that Desiree had.
Yeah, Desiree offered that up as a condition. Lynn indicated she would support that.
Well, I'll ask a question then. If a guy has a gun cabinet for all his equipment, does he have to buy a gun safe for one gun that would come in to be maintained? Okay.
If it doesn't belong
So
to
he
him.
doesn't have to replace all his own?
I don't think that
He's
we
just
could
talking
regulate
about
his
some
own.
security that would come in for the little maintenance. Okay, I'll go along with that. Seems silly.
Other comments or questions?
It would be much like the police department having gun safes down in the bottom of their building there for whenever the officers come in or deal with any of the outside individuals. They have to lock their pistols up in the gun safes.
Well, I'm not sure they don't use a gun cabinet, but.
It's a safe.
Well, I've seen gun safes that they put them in when I've done the
I've
open
seen
house
theirs as a
tours.
safe.
the only reason that I raise that, and it's nothing to do with Merrimack or otherwise anywhere else in New Hampshire, but in taking a look at some of these federal firearm statistics, there's an inordinate number of stories of guns stolen from police departments. Awful lot of those.
Yeah.
Inside jobs.
That's a different place than what I was talking about. What I'm talking about is.
No, and I'm not suggesting it has anything to do with Merrimack at all, but
No,
I
I
mean,
know,
we're worried
but,
about the
I'm
safety of a
sure.
federal firearms license. It's bad guys get the guns. Lynn?
I don't like it there. I really don't. But to be perfectly honest, I don't know that we have the ability to prevent it. I wish we did, but I don't see that we do.
And I have to say, Mr. Chairman, I totally second that. I think a gun business is totally the wrong thing to be in a residential area. But I've been reading most of the time whilst listening. And I don't know where we can knock it down. I think it's terrible. I mean, I'm totally against the whole thing, but I don't see where we've got anything to hang a denial on it. I hate it, but.
Well, I want to make a comment for Mr. Mailer's benefit. I don't have the same level of concerns about a gun business. I feel that gun dealers and the people that frequent them are honest people, and there isn't those risks there. Nevertheless, Mr. Mailer, I think that you got to take a look around the room and see the divisiveness that this business is going to create in your neighborhood. And you certainly, if we vote to approve this, you'd have the right to do it. But whether you ought to go ahead with doing that, realizing what your neighbors think of it and the community that you have to live in, you might, on your own, give it a second thought and try and decide whether there's, if you want to proceed with it, a commercial business that you pick up and do with that. And that's separate from whether you have a legal right to do with it. You can certainly hear the emotions from your neighbors, and I think that you ought to value that input from them. They're important people around you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That puts it much better than I could have ever put it.
Well, that's separate from what point you were making. Other comments or questions? If not, there's a motion properly seconded with the conditions outlined by Tim on the table. Are there any other conditions from the staff memo that we need to consider? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposed. Any abstaining? 6-1 with Mr. Redding opposed, for the record. So you're approved.
Thank you very much.
With those conditions, you'll get a notice from Tim that outlines all the things that are required of you.
Thank you. You'll have it
And the advice.
Point of order, you're saying it's dependent upon the town council approval?
Oh, of course.
Yes. Yes, there's a requirement of that. With that, we will come back to item 3 on our agenda, which is Edgebrook Heights LLC, Wigston Properties LLC, and Hugh Peter Nash, 1987 Revocable Trust, 1, as the co-applicants and co-owners. This is a continued public hearing for consideration of final approval of an application for a conditional use permit to permit a future mixed-use development consisting of retail, office, multifamily, residential, and assisted living parcels located at 1373955 in an unnumbered parcel at DW Highway in the I-1 Industrial, Aquifer Conservation, and Flood Hazard Conservation Districts, Tax Map 1E, Lots 4-1, 4-2, and Tax Map 2E, Lots 6-2, 7, and 8. And this item is continued from the March 18th, May 20th, June 17th, and July 22nd Planning Board meeting. Jim, have we really visited that many times on this?
Yeah. A couple
Tim.
of them are continuances without appearance, but.
I got you.
I have nothing else to add. I think the board is familiar with the project and knows where we stand on where we're at right now.
Thank you. Jim, I know that we know each other well, but please introduce yourself
You
for
bet.
the record, sign in, and tell us where we stand with the project.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Jim Petropoulos. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, doing business at 3 Congress Street in Nashua, New Hampshire, tonight representing Edgebrook Heights LLC. With me to my left is our project attorney, Brad Westgate, with the firm of Weiner and Bennett from Nashua, New Hampshire. Also in the audience tonight are Bernie Plant and Kevin Slattery, principals of Edgebrook Heights LLC. And we brought with us our traffic consultant, Steve Perna, who appeared before us the last time we were before the Merrimack Planning Board. Mr. Chairman, as just read in the record, we are seeking a conditional use permit for a proposed mixed-use development
property on DW Highway in southeast Merrimack. And as just mentioned, this is our 6th appearance on the project. I will try to be brief, given the lengthy discussion you just had. What I'm going to try to do is focus on those points that I thought were key at the last hearing. We've downloaded the minutes, we've read the minutes, and what we took from it were really 4 things that the board noted. Fencing, buffers, phasing, and some additional fiscal questions from the original fiscal study that we had submitted. In addition to those 4 items, in between the last meeting and tonight, Attorney Greg Michael prepared a letter dated July 14, 2014 that outlined concerns of his client relative to the northern access drive, and we'll attempt to address that as well. So I'm going to dive right into those 4 or 5 points, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brad, and Brad is going to kind of pull some things together, and again, we'll try to be brief. With regard to fencing, Mr. Chairman, we heard at the last meeting concerns from the abutting tenant, Nanocomp, as well as the abutting property owner, National Industrial Portfolio, NIP, that they were concerned about pedestrians kind of willy-nilly walking across our northerly property line. So the master plan, the master concept plan, has included fencing that would run along this back edge of our proposed 24-unit building, along the entire northern property line, all the way to our proposed right turn-in entrance. I'm sorry, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
No, just slips under the edge there.
Sorry about that. Again, along the northerly edge here up to the curb cut in this location. There is currently fencing there now. I think it's some old wire fencing. It's probably out of date. I noticed at the site walk it was in need of renewal. I would think that fencing would be a combination of, in this particular area, 6-foot chain link fence. And then as we've discussed, and what I'll continue to discuss tonight in this buffer area, I would think 6-foot, some type of solid wall fence along that common property line. With regard to the buffer, our testimony, I think, has been pretty consistent. We have proposing that this is probably the most sensitive area based on the discussions. Personally, with the property owner to the north, as well as the meetings here. Again, to remind the board that we have currently in the location of the closest building a 70-foot tree buffer here that we propose to supplement with understory planting. In other words, we've got tall trees. If there's some visual underneath, we'd like to support that with the proper vegetation. This area here, as you know, was an area that had been previously kind of cleared out with some gravel removal. We think it's better served by creating what I call a golf course berm. It's probably an earthen berm, 6 to 8 feet in height, with evergreen plantings all atop that berm. So we're getting some both sound attenuation and visual attenuation here. And as well, we may attempt to weave the fence in there as well to give it some greater height as well. Our proposed buffer, as you know, in the Merrimack regulations, they give the applicant the option on buffers. We think this is the best buffer. This is a Category D type 3 buffer, which allows 50 feet of separation with combinations of plantings and fencings and such. Just to have a 100-foot no touch here, I don't think would be as good of a buffer as what we're proposing. And of course, all this is with the notion that as we come in, hopefully in the future with a site plan here, there'll be a great amount of detail focus there with definitive landscape plans subject to review by the town and this board. Our review of the meeting minutes from the last hearing focused in on phasing from a couple different fronts. I think the board was trying to get an understanding of how this could be built, and I think the comment was made, we don't want pieces to be built that are a negative drain on the town from a fiscal standpoint. And so what I'd like to do is discuss the phasing as we propose that has been included in the concept plan, and then circle back to the fiscal, because one of the things that the The rework of the fiscal study looked at each individual parcel, each individual land use by themselves. And I'll generate some numbers that our fiscal consultant provided to the town. First and foremost, the infrastructure would need to be built first. We talked about this 400-foot public road and the road improvements, creating the four-way signal where there currently is a three-way intersection. The improvements out in the street, the pedestrian crossing, that is all part of the infrastructure that would need to be built day one. And then, of course, the sewer line running in the public sewer easement to sewer the project. As we propose, phase one includes the following. The first phase, after the road, would be the residential component, 156 units. Access road, again, private road, parking, utilities, and the development here, which would utilize the infrastructure of the roadway and the sewer. We anticipate the second phase of development to be the commercial district down in the northwest corner of the property. And whether it's a combination of all of these elements, all of these uses, or a portion of the uses, we're unable to really tell that at this time. But we see that as being the next piece, the next phase.
Are you familiar with this?
No.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Should I be?
No.
No, we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
You will.
Right. The third phase, as represented on our plan, is the commercial offices. Again, we've got two small little commercial office buildings, one-story buildings in here with supporting parking and access off the cul-de-sac. And then the fourth phase would be the proposed El Lily project located here at the corner. This information, again, has been added to our plan set. And more specifically, when we tie it into the fiscal evaluation, we had our fiscal consultant, Mark Fougere, Fougere Planning, meet with the town, Tim Thompson, as well as the town's consultant, Arnett Development Group, to review the phasing of the project and what impact it would have from a fiscal perspective. That letter and that information, I believe, was provided in your packet. The result of his analysis was that if you were to break out each phase and looked at them from a financial perspective, each one has a positive impact to the town. The apartments by themselves net out in a positive manner $254,000 to the town. This commercial area here, $20,000 per year to the town. The small offices, $25,000, and the elderly, $84,000. It's our understanding that the town's consultant, Arnett Development, is in agreement with the conclusions that were reached by Fougere. As I mentioned, since the last meeting, Attorney Michael has forwarded us to a letter, as well as from their traffic consultant, VHB, with concerns about the offset intersections along Daniel Webster Highway. And in particular, between the northern access drive and one of the uses is Skips Marine. And what they're worried about is somebody who wants to make a left turn into Skips Marine could be conflicting with a left turn into the northerly access drive. Steve Pernow, who's here tonight, is our consultant. He responded in a letter dated July 16, 2014, and in it he cites 6 reasons why he does not share the same concern. Mr. Pernow concludes that the roadway will function no differently than any other arterial roadway with center turn lanes and offset drives. And Mr. Pernow is here tonight to answer any questions. I'd like to wrap up my brief presentation by just bringing the board back to the first time we met and what changes we've made, both from comments from the board, comments from staff, and really comments from the abutting property owners. If you remember, Mr. Chairman, we've added parking to be compliant with the town parking code for the multifamilies. We've swapped locations of the elderly in the offices. We've reduced the number of apartments from 168 to 156, and in doing so, created added space and room for this buffer along that northerly property line. We've added dimension and detail to this buffer, both in terms of our representation and what our intent is there, as well as the fencing that was brought forth at the last meeting. And we revised our northerly entrance from a full access, as we have a right to do, to as it exists today, with just an entrance only, and then an entrance only into our site. And then, of course, we provided a clearer picture on phasing. We continue to think the project has been prepared in a responsible manner, and it has good balance in terms and size and scale. What I'd like to do is just turn it over to Brad, and then maybe we can answer questions collectively, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, my name's Brad Westgate with Weiner and Bennett Nashua, representing the applicants. I won't take a long time as well, Mr. Chairman. The point I wanted to make is just to note at several levels that the applications that has been submitted with the refinements that have been made over time through the analysis that this board has made, through the input you've done, through our interaction with the abutters, establishes an application that meets all the criteria for the granting of a conditional use permit. Tonight, Jim has talked about the last few items that were left on the table a little bit from the June 17th meeting. We've demonstrated both tonight and through the submittals that came after June 17th that those remaining issues and criteria have been addressed. Tim Thompson, in his staff report for tonight's meeting, obviously has concluded that we've met the criteria because he's recommended approval. He certainly wouldn't recommend approval if some or other of the conditional use criteria had not been met by tonight. Just again to reiterate a little bit about the remaining issues that were dealt with tonight as a result of the June 17th meeting. First, the fiscal impact matter. As Jim has noted, Mark Fougere supplemented his initial fiscal impact study, met with Tim Thompson and the representative from our Net Development Group. They're on the same page. I think in Tim Thompson's report, he notes that the financial experts, the fiscal experts, have come to a consensus. Phasing plan we've detailed. The buffering has been demonstrated, supplemented by Jim, and certainly is adequate and meets the regulation that permits several buffering alternatives. The fencing has been added as we've discussed with the board. The issues that both NIP, National Industrial Portfolio, and ANOCOMP had really boil down to just these few. NIP has maintained that there are 3 criteria in the conditional use permit process that we didn't satisfy. Again, that's contrary to Tim Thompson's recommendations, but it's also contrary to the information you've seen both tonight and in the previous meetings and submitted in writing. Just to note those 3 criteria. Again, the fiscal impact one was the first. Fundamentally, NIP's concept was that if a fiscal impact study is to be done, it needs to take into account the impact on them as a private property owner from a leasing perspective. That's not the standard. That's something that you just can't judge. And frankly, if it was the standard, it would put you in a position of analyzing on every project that required a fiscal impact analysis whether private property owner A is somehow adversely impacting private property owner B. Well, does that mean CVS can't locate within a mile of a Walmart? That's not of a Walgreens, pardon me. That's not the analysis that the fiscal impact study contemplates. Our net group obviously didn't raise that as a element of what the fiscal impact study should look into, and neither did Mr. Thompson in his analysis. And those are factors that you just can't get your arms around anyway. There's no way for any of us to know whether Project A that's permitted in a zone is going to have an adverse fiscal impact on Project B or Property B, both of these private properties. You can certainly analyze impact on town services because there's a vast amount of data that experts can draw from in making judgments about how a project affects town services on a fiscal basis. But you can't do it on a private property basis, which is effectively what NIP was arguing. There's just too many unknowns, too much speculation. Think of NanoComp's case, for example, if you want to factor theirs in. They have their business is contracting with the Defense Department. well, budget cuts can move that business one way, or foreign conflicts can move it another way, for example. Our project could have a number of speculative effects. We could be providing, for example, in the residential component, a housing stock that employers in the area find viable, brings to the immediate area an employee base that helps decide for them whether siting in the area is good. That can enhance property values, for example. Federal state tax policy has other implications. Company relocation strategies have a number of implications. You just can't put your arms around this stuff and factor it into the fiscal impact study. So what Arnett did in reviewing what our consultant Fougere provided makes sense. They touched on the issues that need to be touched on, focused on town services, and came up with the positive results on a phase-by-phase basis that Jim itemized. The traffic issue's been discussed a lot. I frankly think the board has gotten past the notion of finding viable the north entrance to be an entrance only, as opposed to both ingress and egress. As the board is well aware, the easement rights that apply to the property permit both ingress and egress, but the developers are willing to allow it be ingress only, not both ways, as a good planning accommodation. The buffer, we think, is the appropriate one. The fencing, we think, is appropriate as well. Finally, we've talked about it before, and the board, I think, recognizes that the town's master plan calls for this type of development in this area. The master plan recognizes that this part of Daniel Webster Highway is mixed use already. Harris Pond, of course, is a classic mixed-use development. There's a lot of residential, multifamily type residences in the area. And as is stated very clearly in section 2.7 of the master plan, which I'll read briefly, notes that the southerly end of the corridor, known as Thorntons Ferry Village, characterized by large land parcels and uses, could provide another opportunity for significant mixed-use development that takes advantage of existing businesses, access to FE Everett Turnpike, and proximity to the river to create a walkable mixed-use development to anchor this end of the corridor and provide a gateway to Merrimack from the south. Frankly, that paragraph from the master plan is almost saying this property should have a mixed-use result. This is the very property that is targeting, and our project is implementing that concept. Jim's mentioned, and it's important to remember, of course, that this is really just the first step in opening the gate to enable the detailed site plans and subdivision plans to be presented to you when the precise day comes for those elements of the project to be fully engineered and analyzed. So there's always the opportunity to detail the components that the concept plan presently depicts. So we think that the application's in order for approval, Mr. Chairman. Of course, we're both happy to answer any questions, and as is Mr. Parnell or the applicants, and thank you again.
Thank you, Attorney Westgate. Of the open items that we had intended to address, the phasing is the one that's on my mind the most, and I understand the proposal that you've made in terms of what you'd like to see for phasing. In my view, and I don't know whether my board members share the view, the conditional use permit process and developing a mixed-use development is intended to create mixed-use developments. And your phasing plan would allow phase one to proceed in a way that isn't mixed. It isn't become mixed until you have phase two accomplished, where you've got both residential and commercial. And because of that, I'd like to see the phasing plan modified a little bit. It ought to be a mixed-use development the whole time, in each phase. There ought to be mixed uses, in my view. Is there a way that we can reshape the phasing plan? Is there something that we can, that works for the applicant financially and economically, that maintains a mixed-use development throughout the process?
Let me, if I may, before trying to answer that question, but let me set the background of the logic behind this phasing approach. And why we think it's not inconsistent with the notion of mixed use as the ordinance contemplates. The ordinance is fairly bare bones in terms of any guidance on what phasing is to be. There's not all that much in the ordinance about that. So I think you have to then analyze the application that comes before you and say to yourself, okay, they're proposing X, Y, and Z for phasing. Does this work in the context of this ordinance for this particular application? And here's the thought. As Jim noted, the infrastructure is first and foremost. That is the first phase. The cul-de-sac road, the utilities, including the sewerage for the entire project. So the idea is to get the whole site ready so that all of the then elements can come online without new public improvements having to be brought on, other than the particular utility tie-ins, for example, once the core utilities are fully servicing the site. Obviously, the residential piece is the largest piece in terms of impervious surface that's going to be implemented. It's also contiguous and frankly, the back section, if you will. It seems to us that it makes sense from a lot of perspectives to build the residential piece as a complete whole first. Number one is it's in the back. So if you're going to build from the back out. You don't want to have, there's no point in having the construction of the back, which can be hidden and dealt with independently than the front portions, to be fragmented. If, for example, we were to build part of the residential and part of the commercial sort of at the same time, or phase 1A and then phase 1B and then back to the residential, you're creating a fair amount of disruption for the first group of residents who are going to live in there. You're also creating conceivably a little bit of a safety issue, because why have the construction aspect of, say you build the 3 back buildings first, but you don't build the remaining front buildings in the residential section until later. You're causing the residents who are going to go to the back buildings to go buy the other residential construction as opposed to it being a completed whole. You also run into a financing and sort of fiscal issue, because a developer of the residential piece is going to want to build the whole residential piece, not in a fragmented way. They're going to want to get it financed that way as well. The infrastructure cost is going to have to be the entirety for it. So you don't want to build the entire infrastructure for the residential component and then yet only put online half of the units. That doesn't make sort of financial and development sense. So the last piece is, if you note in your ordinance about the conditional use permit purposes, it talks about complementary elements. Well, one of the ideas of a project such as this is that the residences and the commercial uses complement each other. Well, you can't really market very well, and you can't really theorize on paper what the commercial uses are to be when you really don't have online the residential uses as a whole either. So the idea is, if the residential use is in place, then it makes much more viable the alternatives that the commercial use sections can generate. You've got a constituency to some degree for certain potential commercial uses. You don't have that if it's fragmented or it's still on the drawing board. And lastly, it's just impossible to sort of predict the market. You can predict, you can get your arms around the idea that if I build a residential component as an entirety, I can finance it, it makes construction sense, it can be done as a whole, it can support the infrastructure costs that are needed. But when you fragment that, you're guessing. And does it make sense to build part of the residential and guess at what the commercial can be, rather than solidify the residential and form the basis for that complementary concept that the conditional use permit regulation contemplates. That to me outweighs this notion of, well, build some of the residences, but then get some of the commercial going, just so you got two types of uses sort of going at the same time. I don't think the project's benefited by that, frankly.
Attorney Westgate, there are merit to the points that you made from the developer standpoint and perhaps even from the town standpoint. And I'm not sure that I'd necessarily insist that you divide up the residential. But the issue is that if you build 5 residential buildings, and because you don't know what the market's going to be like, and you need to get those people in there, and you don't know what the call for commercial is going to be, and that project stops right there, you've essentially completely defeated the purpose of the conditional use permit. You've completely undermined it, and you've built residential and industrial zone where it doesn't belong and wouldn't have authority to exist standing on its own. And that's what I've got to protect as the chairman of the planning board, is the integrity of the ordinance, which is, it's a mixed-use development. It's got to be a mixed-use development.
I've given a lot of thought to that, and I sort of said to myself, if the board thinks that a mixed-use development has to sort of spring like simultaneous growth in a garden of 6 different vegetables that have the same growth period, then really all your ordinance can ever contemplate is a one mass developer who is going to go in and uniformly construct everything from ground up simultaneously, as opposed to a developer who is trying to mix in different types of users, different types of end developers, versus one large developer who does a multiple set of concepts all at once. My point being that the ordinance, if the ordinance has to proceed such that all the uses kind of grow together, then the ordinance only contemplates one type of developer, a very well-heeled, I can build everything at once, kind of come hell or high water approach. I don't think you thought of it that way. I don't think you tried to restrict your ordinance to only be geared towards that kind of developer.
Well, I'm not sure that that's what we're requiring of you as the applicant either. I think that you can do some phasing and bring some components online and still have it be a mixed-use development throughout the project. But also, I'm not sure I agree that we aren't looking for a substantial developer in the concept of conditional use permit. That's why there's a minimum lot size. That's why there's, all of the requirements that make these things big. Yeah. They're not for somebody that wants to build their log cabin with trees they cut down in the back.
The only thing I'll add to the example, Mr. Chairman, you cited, if these 5 were to get built with the infrastructure, again, my testimony has always been this will get developed based on market conditions. If somebody comes in tomorrow and wants to do the elderly, I'm sure our clients are going to
I have no question at all.
And we might come back to you saying, I know we told you it was phase 4, but we got somebody who wants to build this now, it might be phase 2.
And I wouldn't have any objection to that, but the point is that if these commercial uses are really kind of a fiction until they get some attention from somebody that wants to put the money to them, then really what we're considering is a fictional proposal.
But in what you just said is, we haven't done anything to prohibit this from being built out. Okay? If we build these 5 and we're sitting here with this land, we sit and wait, or we come back here and you're going to tell us, no, you're not going to get any more big apartment buildings. Okay, you're going to sit and say, well, the converse is to build a building just for the sake of building a building? That doesn't make sense.
Well, for a start, I'd like to knock a few holes in what Attorney Westgate said. Firstly, he said you start at the back, and actually you've got it the wrong way around. Any development I've ever seen, they start building from the public road and go, and the last houses they build is the ones at the far back. So to say you build the far back ones first is a sort of conflict of anything I've ever seen. But I am totally with what my chairman says. I have no confidence that these commercial retail things will get built. And we have chapter and verse at the other end of town of another one where we still haven't got it ever really finished. And that's a fact. Another mixed-use development has never really finished. We've never had it filled out. And I am concerned that you are building a residential thing with the hope that you might build the rest of it. And it's the hope. You're not sure what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. I think you fall short of the criteria for mixed-use development. I mean, if you want to build the 5 residential units, go ahead and do it. But I would turn to you and say you won't get COs until we see something else. Now, you wouldn't like that, but that's where I feel. That's what I feel in my heart. You'd hate me for saying it, but that's where I am. But what if you build those 5 and you can't fill in the gap? What do? We've screwed up.
But if I may, but what if any developer gets something approved by you and can't finish it? It could be a residential subdivision. It could be a strip mall. It could be an industrial facility. It could be a building. It could be several industrial buildings next door that are not occupied, for example.
Yeah, there's no question about that, but none of those things that you've suggested as comparisons are something that can only exist by virtue of being a mixed development. In other words, if you have a 75-unit residential development somewhere out in the property and 50 homes get built and the last 25 don't, it's still a residential development in a residential neighborhood, has every right in the zoning ordinance to be there.
But we do too.
It's mixed,
we're permitted. The conditional use is a permitted use in this district, and I don't read in the ordinance that somehow there has to be a mandate that a certain package of the differing uses have to somehow spring up together. What is the board's thought then? What do you think phasing should be? How should this mix occur? How do we guarantee that the commercial building is going to have X, Y, and Z tenants? How can anybody possibly do that? And how can land use possibly be governed on that speculation? I don't see it.
The thing that Lynn held up to say, were you familiar with this, is Alistair's effort at proposing a way to phase things. And basically it's to put 3 residential buildings up and then the commercial that's close to Nanocomp and then the other 2 residential and then finally the office and the senior living. And that's a suggestion. It's not in any way this board's requirement. But if you did that, you would have something that's mixed use from day one. That's what a conditional use permit
let's put it this way. We would have buildings that are residentially designated and commercially designated. Whether they're physically used is another question. That's totally market dependent.
But if the ideas that you're proposing don't have a market, then propose something that is.
Oh, we believe this does, but we can't, it's impossible to predict how the market plays itself out with this package of uses in front of us. That's why the notion of the vitality of the project with the residential component built first puts much more probability in the other pieces coming together rather than the drawing board effect. I guess that's...
And I'm glad to give you the flexibility that you need to try to figure this out, but on the other hand, the one thing that you gotta, the one bell you gotta ring is that it's a mixed-use development.
Could you, let me turn it round. What would you say, given that you've heard the arguments from Chairman Best and myself, and I think I've got some support elsewhere on the board, what would you expect us to do if you build those 5 residential units and nothing happens with the commercial thing? How could we look the town, how could we look anybody in the face and say we've done our job? Because there's this big hole and nothing's there. That is no longer a mixed-use development, it's a residential development. And I know what will cut, because we've had it at the other end of town, a proposal to convert the industrial commercial element back into residential. Now, we obviously think you're men of honor and all that stuff, but how can we honestly say it's mixed use with what you're saying? You could build those 5 units in 10 years' time, God willing, we're all still here. You still haven't built them because you don't know what's going to go in there. It's no longer mixed use. You've built a residential estate. Sorry.
Mr. Plant, you tried to jump in a couple of times.
If I may, Mr. Bertie Plant, is one of the principals of Edgebrook, is now sitting at the table, and he's going to speak in just one moment if the chairman is so permit. And while we appreciate your noting we are men of honor, and we also believe this board is of great competence and honor as well, and you folks know that. I guess the only answer I can, it's kind of, again, twofold, I'm repetitive. The building out of the residential makes far more viable and predictable the probability of the building out of the other components. That's, to us, clear. But in addition, I just don't see how the ordinance can mandate a sequence of development that isn't established by fiat. It's established by market. It's a function of what the market perceives as viable to fill in the various elements. I don't see the
I
ordinance
can't agree with you there. I
mandating
mean, if
that.
it was all about the market, we wouldn't be here tonight. We wouldn't have a planning board.
You're here for a lot of reasons. You're
Just
here
build
for
what the market says you should build.
No. You're here for design. You're here for the implementation of safety, public welfare, density, regulations, all of that. There's a lot of components to what is before you, which we fully understand. But the market determines the sequence of the development. I think it's as simple as that. I'm sorry, and I don't have more to add to it. Bernie, you may.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Plant.
Believe it or not, the commercial uses along Daniel Webster Highway are of more value to us than the residential piece. It behooves us to construct those commercial uses as quickly as possible because it'll generate more cash than a 156-unit rental project. The rental project, we are digging into our pockets to construct all the infrastructure that, in fact, is going to serve the entire development. If we were to construct this assisted living facility, we're constructing this entry road, we're constructing this road, and likely roughing this all the way in.
Let me get you close to a microphone so the folks at home can hear you while you're doing that. I understand the...
In order to bring sanitary sewer and to discharge drainage to the lowest part of the site. So, for us to start any of the commercial uses, perhaps with the exception of the use, the northernmost use, which would have availability of sewer on Daniel Webster Highway and drainage in another direction, we're constructing all that infrastructure for the assisted living facility or for those office buildings, probably for the gas station and convenience store. Now, that's argument number one. Number two, we have not marketed the project, with the exception of the sign that exists out there that says 35 available acres. We have not marketed the project. We have not hired a broker to market the project. We've been approached by a couple people, including an assisted living group that we had a deal with. This permitting process got delayed. They went on to do something else. I hear recently that an assisted Alzheimer's facility is coming in not too far from South Merrimack in Nashua, but fairly close, that may take care of the market. So that assisted living could turn into something else. We're not sure. I think that there's a market for the couple little office buildings in the back there. That represents 14,000 square feet of space. So we haven't gone to the market with this project. We really can't go to the market with this project until we have a conditional use permit that we can say, if you're interested in assisted living, we can get started with you. If we're interested in financing and constructing the multifamily housing, we can get that underway. But we have to create some activity on this site, and the best way to create the activity is to start with the residential and work our way out. However, we do understand your point, and I think what we're prepared to do is we want to do the residential first. It makes most logical sense to us. We will prepare the other sites from a grading and from a utility standpoint so that they can be marketed immediately. So as soon as we start the 400-foot entry road, we'll prep those commercial sites so that they're all set to go and we can market them as ready-to-go commercial sites and get out to the market and see what exists. I can't tell you that they're going to go quickly, or that maybe they will go quickly. We don't know.
Well, I guess I appreciate what you're saying, and I thought we were on the same page at the beginning when you were talking about how those commercial sites on Daniel Webster Highway are the most valuable to you and the most sought after and the most high demand.
I didn't say the most sought after because we haven't marketed them. We know that there is a market for multifamily housing right now. We've had a study done, we know that exists, and there's a financing market for multifamily housing. Now, a favorable financing market for multifamily housing.
Sure.
The commercial market along Daniel Webster Highway, we shouldn't kid each other. There are vacancies that exist, and we think that we have to create
there's some uniqueness with what you have. A gas station is not something that's generally very common down that south end of town. That's got some, what you plan to do in the building closest to NanoComp is not something that we could sort of put our finger on today. But if you were telling me that you were going to build the gas station, that retail building, at the same time that you go in with the residential, all 5 residential, and those 2 buildings, and then the office building and the assisted living are later phases, I would be satisfied with that. Because that would be telling me that we're going to have, when the residential shovel hits the ground, that there's construction underway on these other sites as well. And it's a mixed-use development. It's satisfied the purpose of the ordinance. The gas station maybe would be one that you could consider whether that is something you could talk about or agree to tonight, because I think its demand is very unique down there, and you probably won't have a lot of difficulty finding somebody that wants that. The other commercial space really depends on too many things to predict, because there are other opportunities for people to do some things that are competitive on a neighboring parcel or something. But I do appreciate what you're saying in terms of the economics. If those 2 parcels up front are the ones where the real value is for you guys, though, wouldn't that mean that those could be the ones you want to get done first? Why would you dig into your pocket on the residential if the money's in those commercial ones?
Because there's a market for the residential right now. There's a rental market and there's a financing market that is quite strong right now. I can't tell you because we're not in the commercial end of, but we've had expression of interest for the gas station, for the assisted living, and for the office. We just have to get out to the market and see. We know, because we're kind of on the residential side of things, that apartment market exists and the financing market exists for it.
And other applicants have indicated the same thing for this board, so it seems to be consistent with everything else that we're hearing, that multifamily residential rental market's there and it's strong. I get that. How do we get to a mixed-use development? And maybe I'm beating that drum too hard and there's no support for me with the board.
I completely agree with you.
We're totally, I think, generally the same feeling.
That's right.
Just kind of direction back to the use, the multi-use, the purpose of this. It wouldn't matter if you were building all retail. The key would be that you build 2, mixed use of it. Would be, it should be 2 different uses so that you get the mixed use component of it. That said, if you just built the gas station portion of that other one and all the residential, would that still be considered mixed use enough? Would that be something that, and you leave the pad for the other one and then when it gets built, but at least you have.
Then you're mixed use from day one.
Yeah.
Whether that's sufficiently mixed use, I think that based on what the applicant has told us, I could go along with that.
Well, that also brings the point that Bernie was making, that getting the site visible from the street, that's where your visibility is. The visibility is not necessarily in the multifamilies, but the visibility is right there with the gas station, with that retail right there.
I think it also helps with just knowing that the gas station will be designed to be nice and attractive if it's going to be the front gate to your residential community. You know that you won't get the ugly gas station, which is what you might get if it was last. So, are there other comments? Mike?
The only other argument, and maybe just the devil's advocate perspective, but we did hear from the other applicants that were on the north side, and they did have some very strong arguments about how one generates the other, and that the market is the trend is in that direction. It seems like the concept of risk and not being led to believe that this is something that's not a mixed use is, I think, what we're contemplating. And it would seem to me that, that the way that things are moving, that the way that sites are being developed today, that developers have a better handle on how that mixed use part will work. And I think that they're putting the parts and pieces into place nowadays to make it work effectively.
I think they're trying to. I know that when we had the conversation about that other parcel, we did talk to them about, you got to get a shovel in the ground on the big warehouse piece if you want the residential, because same reason, has to be mixed use. Same rules apply. Nelson, you had a comment?
No, I just agree with you. I just agree with you.
I think,
Stan.
Mr. Chairman, we can probably, in discussion with Kevin Slattery, I think with the residential, we can commit to the gas station right off. That would get us going.
Get those at the same time in
Yeah.
phase one.
That,
And then
you
the
know-
other phases would be as the market dictated for the 2 office buildings, that other retail, and the senior living.
Right.
Assisted living, whatever that turns out to be.
Now, the multifamily is probably an 18-month construction period, so we would expect the gas station would be something less. So by the time the last CO issues for the multifamily, the gas station would be underway.
No. By the time you get the last CO, the gas station is up and running, then you bought me. I'm sorry, I know you think we're being a pain, but I want to see mixed use development. So if you're saying to me, can you build all 5 residential and the gas station so that on the grand day you let the last CO for the unit number 5, which is probably the one this nearest to the gas station is delivering gas, you bought me.
I think that I can be a little bit easier than that if I saw substantial constructions that satisfied Tim's department on the gas
All right,
station.
no, I'll be beaten down.
That would satisfy me that they're on the right track for the mixed use. Tom?
So I agreed with where you guys were going at the beginning, but I just want to philosophically talk a little bit about when we first defined and worked on these conditional use permit changes to the ordinances. My understanding, having sat on the board at that point, was that the idea was that somebody would come in conceptually with both the industrial, commercial, and the residential pieces in hand, not that they need to build one and wait to see what else shows up. And so if you want to say that we expect the whole thing to grow up at once, then that's fine. But the idea was that somebody would come with big enough britches to be able to contemplate the entire development and make a mixed-use development that would in fact work together, and that you don't have just a residential and just a commercial or just a retail that don't have somehow an intermix. And this doesn't even have the interaction, because the houses in the back have only one way to get there, to get back to the front, and that's up that long drive. And I've never been happy with that single access point without there being at least a loop or something else that allows those people to easily come forward and use the commercial or retail without having to get in their car and drive all the way around and things of that nature. So I'm still looking for, and have always been looking for, the conditional use permit to be given to an individual that comes in and says, this is the structure and these are the tenants and these are the people that are interested in working in this mixed use environment, and having that mixed use work together, both architecturally as well as job and interaction wise, so that it looks like a cohesive unit as opposed to a lot of empty space and some residential housing that, when the other pieces finally do get built, they may not even look like they're part of the same organization or program.
Right.
That last bit of Tom's comment, I think, is where I have the most strong feelings, and that is, and we've talked about this with this one and the other CUP in town, is that they need to look master planned, that it's supposed to be all planned together. And if it's, we want to do some residential and see what else happens.
Well, planning and construction and marketing are 3 different items. The likelihood of finding, in today's market, in today's world, unless you're at the corner of Main and Main Street in the center of Newton, Mass, or Brookline, Mass, finding the tenants to line up at the same time you're going to do a residential piece is a tough sledding today. It's very tough. Everybody's waiting for the other guy. Is the residential going to go? Is the retail going to go? Do you have an office user? Do you have the assisted living piece? Who's going in the commercial? It's all those kind of questions that come up from the commercial side of things. But I'll go back. We'll commit to the gas station and the residential, and believe me, we will use our best efforts to get the rest of that commercial done simultaneously. It's in our best interest to do that. It doesn't serve our purposes to have vacant land along Daniel Webster Highway at all.
Long term, I don't doubt that. I just want to see that it actually happens, that it actually gets done. Are there other comments or questions? I know that we've got to open it up and have some public comment too. Tom?
But if you look across the street at Harris Pond, that commercial is very poorly utilized. If you look up north that Alistair referred to the other developments where they had commercial buildings that have been built and been vacant, and they haven't been able to get people to move into them, and they've come back to this board crying poverty that they need to turn those into residential units. You know, I believe you 100% that you will do your very best to fill that out, but I don't know that once we stamp approval on this that we're ever going to see anything happen, and that's what we're looking for, is some confidence or some phasing process that gives us better suggestion that in fact this mixed use, this inner development is going to happen in the fashion that's being presented.
I know that the Shaw's Plaza in the south end of town took a long time to fill those parcels up, and it's only very recently that they got approval to build that little pad site.
Last two pads.
That last little pad sites, but where the liquor store is and all of those things took forever to fill up. And
those didn't have any residential.
No, and they're just
But
available
if you
retail
look at the
buildings.
Shaws on the north side of town, the remaining development that they promised has never even thought about coming into fruition.
And
The old Shaw's on Route 3.
Oh, don't mention the old.
Just another one.
And I don't think that it's fair for this applicant to wear the failings of every other developer, but nevertheless, you got to convince us that you can do what others haven't been able to do. Otherwise, this will be five residential buildings, or maybe 5 residential buildings and a gas station, and the end of the line, until the applicant or you guys come forward, or the property changes hands and somebody comes forward and says, can I build 4 more residential buildings? Because nothing else will work. We've tried everything. We've tested the waters. We've looked around.
But the ordinance and the master plan don't mandate the springing all up at once concept. They just don't. The ordinance talks about phasing. So therefore, it by definition sees a sequence that's to occur. The master plan is yearning for a mixed-use development down here. It's not yearning for a multi-billion-dollar corporation to be the only possibility that has a defined set of uses right out of the gate. That's not reality. It's not reality in a location like this. It might be reality on 59th Street and 6th Avenue, but not here.
I don't doubt that there's some merit to the points you're making, but the ordinance doesn't contemplate a phasing plan that allows the point of the ordinance to be undermined.
No, we understand, and that's why we're having this interaction and what Bernie is saying.
Lynn?
Practically, Bernie, recognizing that there's a lot of empty commercial and industrial space in this town, why do you think you can do this and accomplish it?
It would be new construction at the south end of Merrimack, and the south end of Merrimack hasn't seen a whole lot of this type of development recently. We've gotten expressions of interest from the office from people that exist in some of the older buildings along Daniel Webster Highway and would like to be in a new project at the south end of Merrimack, adjacent to a residential development.
Tim?
Across the street.
Pardon me?
Across the street, you're pretty empty.
Yes.
It's commercial, retail.
It could be redone to a new building.
In a residential, and that's exactly what you're saying.
Right.
And what differentiates you from being able to accomplish this when nobody else seems to be able to?
Well, I think the space across the street was, as you may recall, was built for retail use, right? And
It's both.
yeah, the second floor office space there wasn't, right. And for a long time, that I think did pretty well from a retail standpoint. There was a bank in there. And I think perhaps related to the new exit, well, the Anheuser-Busch, the outlet mall exit, reduction in traffic in that area. the aging of the building, that's probably 30 or 35 years old at this point. I'm not sure it really meets the current requirements of office users or retail users. You know, we have average daily traffic there of 16,000, 15,000 cars a day. Retailers typically would like to see, you know, around 20,000 cars a day. That's why we've offered these other alternatives in the assisted living. And you have to recall where that 20,000 square foot building is, or a commercial building is proposed at the northern end of the site, there still remains the possibility that that could be a 32,000 square foot R&D or single level office and industrial use, which would fit on there quite well. And so that's another option rather than that commercial.
Equally well, it could be a restaurant, but I mean, there are restaurants down DW Highway which seem to change hands pretty frequently in that area, the southern end of town. I mean, Yamama's was something, and then it was something else, and something else. I know you mean well, Bernie, but I just have to see mixed development, and you're not giving me any confidence. And I normally believe you everything you tell me, but I just don't.
We would love to be able to tell you that we have all the tenants lined up. We haven't been out to the market to do that. And all I can tell you is that from a financial standpoint, it's in our best interest to fill that space along Daniel Webster Highway as quickly as we can.
I don't doubt that, and I don't know that. I want to be careful what I'm presenting as an argument in terms of wanting mixed-use development, rather than saying, you know, we got a lot of vacant land, a lot of vacant buildings, we don't need another one, because I don't think that that's necessarily a planning function to decide what developers do with their property and how that market works. Although our master plan, I think, did catalog the vacant commercial property at something like 700,000 square feet in town.
Off the top of my head, I don't recall, but.
So there's a lot of competition out there. Now, can you do better, and do you market better? Maybe you can, and that would be great. My only limitation is to see mixed-use development that fits the ordinance. If you can achieve that, then how you proceed with some of that other stuff as the market makes it available, and do you have a connection with a potential retailer that nobody else was able to access, and it works out for you, and that's great, terrific. Allow you all the leeway in the world to do that stuff in the context of a mixed-use development. So, and I think you've already crossed that bridge as far as I'm concerned by saying we'll do the gas station and the residential together at the same time. That's enough for me.
Okay. We'll commit to that.
Other comments or questions? Stan?
No, I was just going to say basically the same thing, that we've had one mixed use in town. We got a proposed one. We got another one coming in. They all want to build the residential part of it first. So there has to be something there. But I also agree there has to be something on our end. And I would be satisfied with just the commitment to get that gas station in as soon as possible, because you've got a residential area. If you've got a gas station, I'm pretty sure a restaurant would fall right in, right next door. So it's like a compromise. It's what everybody wants to do, but I can see what we want to do too. So that, to me, the gas station commitment would go a long way.
And I think it's a generous commitment. I can't imagine another planning board in the state forcing you to build a gas station.
I just want to clarify for the record that, you know, we've been talking about other mixed-use projects that have not had other components constructed, the commercial components. We need to make clear there is a distinction between what we're talking about here in a mixed-use conditional use permit in the industrial district versus a planned unit development is what we're talking about in the instances of Society Hill and those other projects. This and the Flatley property are currently the only two that have been attempted under this process. So I just want to be clear that they are two different animals that we're talking about.
Yeah, no question at all. And I do understand the differences. I think the advantage here that we have is this process where we can approve what the uses are going to be, and that we can propose and require a development agreement, which is where this would have its rubber meets the road in terms of that. If there are no other comments by the planning board, I do want to open it up for public testimony. Tommy, you raising your hand?
No.
Who's pointing to?
Me.
You usually pointing in that?
Going to Tom's comment about consolidating and tying everything in, do you have any anticipation of making pathways between the residential across your green space to the retail or commercial?
They've got a
Walking-
tough slope to
walking
deal
path,
with.
is it?
Hell of a slope.
Okay,
I was thinking the same thing, but then I remembered that slope is.
Okay, never
It's
mind.
like a
But there is a sidewalk that
50-foot
that comes all the way
elevation
up.
difference.
Walking the entire way is a long walk, whereas if.
Yeah, the grade is,
It would be stairs.
You'd want steps.
I think you'd need an escalator or something.
Yeah, you would.
What,
Works for me.
Desiree.
what is the grade change from like the shortest point from the back parking lot up to that, yeah, if you did that? 40 feet vertically? 30, okay.
30 feet. So between the two traffic circles, the one at the end of the residential and the one at the end of this access road, that one and that one, what's the grade change between?
It's not a walkway now. We've walked it.
I think when we were walking the site and kind of standing in that area, we were imagining the top of that residential building would be at eye level as we looked down that from the top of the hill towards the river. From when we
Public
walked the site.
testimony?
Yeah, let's have some public comment. Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in? I think I see one.
I didn't know you were interested.
Why is it when I get to these meetings, it's the bewitching hour, but that's okay. Attorney Greg Michael on behalf of Nanacomp, one of the abutters, tenant abutters, I should say, just to clarify it. I've been interested in the board's comments regarding the phasing issue because I've been involved in a number of the projects that haven't worked out quite as we might have liked, Shaw's North being one. Admittedly, it's not part residential, but I think it does indicate some of the issues that can arise. The board at least was sensible enough in that case to make sure that the infrastructure was in and everything was there, roads, sidewalks, and so forth, the light, so that it would be available if in fact it came about. But as we know, it's been years that hasn't come about. I'm not here to berate the developer on that issue, but I do need to confirm that I agree with the board that if they can't mix it up and make it mixed use, then it's premature. It's that simple. I mean, this is like, we'll make it happen if you let us make it happen. That's not what mixed use is about. It's basically premature at this point if they can't develop a phasing plan that truly meets the spirit of what the ordinance is about. Recall that they went to the zoning board to get a variance to get enhanced residential density. Gee, I wonder why that was done. The idea there, of course, is that probably it can work pretty well with 168 residential units without the rest of the commercial, and we'll get to that when we get there. That's one of the reasons I would suggest that that very likely was done. And I'm not against that, but I think you need to consider the entire dynamic that we're working with here. Getting back to one of Nanacomp's principal concerns relates to the northerly entrance. We've talked about that. I was interested that the developers, they will agree to one-way in and out. It's not them to agree to anything. It's up to this board to determine what's safe, what's appropriate, what meets your standards. This is not an issue about what they legally can do to cross the land. I've been involved in any number of cases in this town with the planning board cut off access points, enhanced access points, restricted access points to make sure that the project was safe and appropriate. I would suggest to the board that the safe access, as we stated before, is at the light. Their own consultant, who apparently has sent a further memo to the board that I haven't seen. I did send Brad my letter. I haven't seen the memo from Steve, who I have a high regard for. But regardless, they can use the light to access this property without allowing this one-way in. We've got concerns about the one-way in because, again, I applaud the buffering and the fencing that Jim Petropoulos spoke about. I want to make that clear. The berming, the trees, that's exactly what we think is appropriate because remember, as I stated at the last meeting, they're the interlopers, not us. Well, I'm not going to take the time to read this now, obviously. Thank you, Tim. You know, we're in the appropriate location. They're not, with all due respect. And they can sit here and dance the dog around about the, you know, the zoning and the this and the that and the special, you know, it's an industrial zone. Let's get real. The problem with continuing to allow that access is twofold, really. The first is it's not needed. The second is it will conflict with some of our traffic, which we can control. And third, it allows an access point to what we want to be more or less a solid buffer between this mixed-use residential, commercial, and our industrial. And one of the principles, if we were an industrial developer in a residential zone, would be to block ourselves completely from the abutting development. That would be required by this board in most circumstances. We believe it's very important to our continued expansion and use of the property that we now occupy and wish to expand further in, that that entrance be stopped, that that area be fenced completely, bermed completely, so that it does not interfere in any way with our continued use and development of our property. I want to make that clear. They don't need it. It does nothing. All it does is create a safety hazard on Route 3. I don't need a traffic consultant to tell me what goes on Route 3. I've been driving it for 45 years. And I'm telling you right now that where you've got, you know, these possible movements in a four-lane wide stretch of road with people trying to make left turns into that site at that location with 3 other access points that don't match up, it's not a good situation. And again, I respect what Steve may tell you and comment on, but it's not a good situation, especially when you don't need it. Because their consultant indicated that they don't need it, that it works at the light. That's really about all I've got to say. I'm not going to read my letter. I've written it. I want to make it clear the board is not engaging in a legal dispute over an easement. I wanted to make that clear because that came up at the last meeting, and I was very concerned right at the end that inference came into the fold, that somehow that you folks dealing with that easement would be somehow getting involved in some legal dispute over it. You're not. You're not. It's a simple question. Is it appropriate? Is it safe? Does it make sense when you look at the abutting property and its uses and the availability that they have to use their light and complete access to their project if it's developed? Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Michael. Are there any questions by members of the board? You running off on us? None? None? Okay. Thank you. Comments or questions by the board? One of the things that occurred to me as part of Attorney Michael's testimony is, as it relates to our previous discussion about when these other pieces come in, if you're talking about a gas station and the residential, I'm leaning towards Greg Michael's position with respect to whether you need that access or whether it does anything for you. But when those commercial come, whenever that happens, I think that accessing that site from there does make sense and would be safe to do. But I don't know if maybe that's a part of how you compromise in this proposal and say that that comes online when that piece of retail or whatever commercial that last building is comes forward. Tim, you're looking at me that look like I'm crazy.
No, you're not crazy at all. I'm just reminding the board that at the individual site plan and subdivision level, there will be another crack at traffic and access as we actually have the full traffic study associated with the specific developments that will need to be reviewed and approved by DOT.
Now, if they're looking for doing the infrastructure first, is that access part of that first phase infrastructure, Jim?
For the record, Jim Petropoulos. Following up on your point, Mr. Chairman, based on the phasing discussion, if we're talking 5 buildings in the gas station pad site, I would not see a need to do that right turn in at that time. Your point about, and Tim's point about when this comes through, more detail on this, that would be the time to consider that access point. But as you just said a minute ago, I would not see us, if we came in with this pad site, this would be part of our infrastructure application. That would not be part of it.
Okay. I don't know, I mean, it's not, certainly not all that Nanocomp is looking for, but at least it puts that down the road whenever there's some knowledge about the use of what's gonna go there, and it may be something that doesn't have a huge amount of traffic or something. Other comments or questions, members of the board?
I'd just like to clarify that what Jim said, you're saying the gas station will work there just using the lighted access, and you won't build that other access through?
That's
for the-
correct.
to support the gas station?
As a part of that phase, it would come
Yeah.
at some later phase
Some later phase. Is that,
as a
is that
one-way.
I just wanted to be sure
Yes.
I understood it
Yes.
right. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Tom?
I guess I was intrigued a little bit about Attorney Michael's comments that separating the clear and pure industrial usage of Nanocomp and NIP from what is becoming a clear and residential, or not residential so much there, but potentially retail or commercial use.
Yep.
Has, I think, merit. There's some concern about allowing that mixture use there, and while I'm not concerned about the huge amount of traffic that Nanocomp has now, certainly that is an industrial use to the left, what it could develop into over time, as long as it stays industrial. It could be beneficial, in fact, to have a clear distinction between those two areas. We're allowing this retail and commercial and mixed-use residential into what was previously an industrial zone only by the CUP.
Keeping it separate makes some sense.
And keeping them separated makes more sense to me than I had thought earlier.
Jim or Brad, can you address the need for having that access road, even as a one-way?
Well, I think one point that Steve Pernon made at the last meeting was that even though and Steve will correct me, but even though the signalized intersection can handle all the traffic for the complex from a volume and peak hour perspective, there is value for the right turn entrance on the north end because of drive-by traffic, because of, I don't know if impulse is the right word, but you see a gas station, you go past the intersection, but now you see the gas station, it's logical to take the right turn into it. I think that was one distinction he made. So there is a need for it from that perspective. The other thing is that if, frankly, the goal of mixed use is going to be thwarted somewhat if that access isn't permitted, the right turn in, because you're going to devalue the very piece that we're looking for to give the balance for the mixed-use purpose that you've just been discussing.
In what way are you talking about devaluating that?
Because if you don't have if you have no ability to access the commercial piece through the north entrance, then the potential users of that are going to say, well, the only access to it is through the signalized intersection. People are going to drive by it, people are going to come to the intersection, not necessarily know it's there, drive by it and not have that ability to drive in. Clearly, access immediately adjacent to the parcel is going to give it value and give it the higher probability of having the mixed-use goal that you want to have out of the gate be attained. I think there's some logic to that.
Potentially, although that depends on how you design your buildings, and that particular one is the one that has a building in the middle of a parking field, which is not my favorite way to see them lay out.
But
I'd
it's
much rather
open
see
and
them.
flat and,
Yeah.
you know, and
Alistair.
Could I also point out that in Mr. Pernod's latest letter dated July the 16th, some of the pictures and the instances he uses in section 6, which refer to where there are similar offsets, he's not actually talking like with like, because on certainly on A, B, C, D, which I know very well, there are 2 lanes in each way with a central reservation piece in the middle, which is not what we're going to get. We're just going to have 4 lanes, and you're going to turn. You've actually got a very clear line on that part of DW Highway, which is basically near what used to be called the Residence Inn. There's a lot more space there than there is up where you're going to be. There really is. I mean, the roadway is virtually 5 widths across at Star Drive. This is really only 4 lanes where you're going to be. I'm more and more coming to the view that we shouldn't allow you to use that entrance. But whether we finalise that tonight or whether we take Tim's view and let it ride a bit is up to my colleagues. But I'm supporting some of what.
Desiree, what do you think?
Just in regards to that access, you're going to get a good view of the site coming in. If you're coming down from the north headed south down there, you're still going to see it in time to see the signal to turn in at that point. It's just going to be coming up that you're not going to see it. So you're talking traffic one way for it, and you're probably going to have it cleared out anyways. Like, you're not going to have the vegetation that's there right now is going to be all cleared out for your future developments at this point. So you're going to have that visibility ahead of time to see properties that are there, like the development that you're putting in. I don't see the necessity to it, is my point.
I think of the shopping center, and I don't know what it's called in Bedford, where Bob's Stores is, and they built Kohl's in there, and then out front they got those couple of restaurants, and you got to come in through one main drive, and you could drive past, what's the burrito place there? That's Chipotle. You drive past it because you passed the entrance if you're waiting to see it, but you got to know what's ahead of you and where you're going to know that you've got to turn before you get to the place that you're going, and it seems to have worked out okay. I don't see it being a problem that they're encountering, people that intend to turn in or driving by because they didn't think that this was the right way to get into the place. I think also when you get down to around exit 6 in Nashua, where Christmas Tree Shop is and all those stores, you get in all those places through one entrance, and you don't drive down the road and say, oh, I want to go to Shorty's. Oh wait, it's 2 exits ago. Yeah.
Can I suggest a
people work it
potential
out.
compromise position on this, that the board have the applicant make a note to the plan that northerly one-way access to be evaluated at the time of site plan approval for that particular site?
It's not a bad approach. Then you at least know what the use is when you see it, and then you know what that traffic looks like. See a traffic study. Does that work for you guys?
It does. And we would argue vigorously against not permitting that, because that's really going to strand that 20,000 square foot building. Now the user of that 20,000 square foot building, whether it's a restaurant or otherwise, has to use the signalized entrance, pass through the gas station lot to get to that lot. And that would be, we would.
I think the argument can be made certainly at the time, depending on the specific use, and I think that way the board will be in a better position to know how warranted that particular access really is.
And what the layout of the lot looks like in terms of where you can put driveways and things like that, because like I said, there's other developments that do the same thing. You come in through one entrance, and that 20,000 isn't any more stranded than that residential 36 unit all the way in the back. I mean, you get there through the through the driveway. But if you're okay with considering taking that up with the site plan for that parcel, does that parcel have a designation that we can use to describe it?
Section A.
Section A? Parcel A. That will take up that driveway as a part of the review of the site plan for Parcel A. I think you'd find some votes on this board that would be willing to do that for you.
Thank you.
If that works. Other comments or questions? Desiree?
No, but I was wondering if it makes sense to make a motion for it at this point, like to basically just seeing that there was the gas station as the multi-use, I'm using the right term. So
If I can get a consensus of the board members about the phasing approach that's been bantered about and agreed upon by the applicant, if I can see, is everybody basically on board with the approach that the gas station take
Gas
place?
station plus 5 residential as the first phase, and then what comes after that is okay? I support
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Majority, seems to be okay.
Yeah.
I will make that modification to the condition.
Okay. And so what would be in order if we were going to take some action on this application tonight is a motion to grant final approval of the conditional use permit, subject to a whole pile of conditions that are in the memo and that Tim will otherwise help us sort out here tonight.
The only other thing I would ask the board's direction on is proposed precedent condition number 3. If there's anything missing from that that you would want to see as part of the discussion on development agreement or other appropriate legal instrument.
Would sidewalks fall into that question? Sidewalks along Daniel Webster Highway? I'm trying to remember if we talked about that from before.
I think we may have already voted to waive the sidewalks
We
on
have.
DW Highway
Okay,
because
right,
of the
thank you.
internal ones.
There already are sidewalks, and
They already exist.
No,
they
We
exist.
wouldn't have voted to waive them.
Thank
So
you.
we're not wavering.
Keep them.
Please don't take that. Okay.
So
So sidewalks are not an issue. What else is in the condition?
The one thing that I've heard a couple of times come up that I think might be appropriate to add to number 3 is something regarding continuity of architectural design or something of that nature as part of that discussion.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we want to
That-
see built in there.
yeah.
That, and the way that you stated is very succinct and understandable. Support that.
Should we apply continuity of architectural design also to landscape in that it uses a similar character? Because we talked about that with the other CUP, was that we try to apply either a similar detail because they're very different uses from the
Well,
residential.
it is actually here, architectural design review of all proposed structures shall be required at the time of subsequent site plan applications
Okay.
So we get a look at those later.
to ensure compliance with section 12.04, etc.
Now, I've suggested what might be a motion if people are willing to make it,
Yes.
but we don't have a maker of
I
the
would,
motion.
so I would make the motion, I propose to make the motion as Bob has just articulated.
The motion, as best I could tell, is articulated is to grant final approval to the conditional use permit with the conditions in Tim's memo
As modified here
as
this evening.
modified here tonight as far as the
As far as the
phasing.
gas station portion of the phasing, continuity of architectural design as part of the review of the development agreement, and then to note on the master site development plan that the Northerly Drive access to be evaluated at the time of site plan review of parcel A.
I so move.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this includes our requirement for a development agreement with the town.
That's item number 3, correct.
Any other discussion regarding that motion?
Yeah, it's a little bit off the motion, but it was a question I wanted to go back to, and it had to do with the fiscal analysis. During the fiscal analysis, there were some questions raised by our consultant, and I understand that we haven't had any modification to this analysis, but
There is an addendum that should have been in your packet from Mark Fougere that
Yeah,
outlines the
there was.
work that happened after the meeting that took place between myself, Mark, and Stu Arnett. So the memo from Mark, I've included as part of condition number 1, that addendum be revised and rolled into the final fiscal impact analysis.
okay. You have the date of that memo, just,
July the 14th, 2014.
thank you. Thank you.
Do you have one, or you need a copy?
Not at the moment.
I need a
but-
copy.
We give them a couple copies.
I've only got the original.
Doesn't have to be tonight, but at some point you get a copy to discuss. Any other discussion regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seconded by Lynn Christensen, I'm sorry. If there's no other discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed. One opposed, 2 opposed. 5-2, any abstain? 5-0 with Counselor Koenig and Mr. Milnes opposed. So that's granting conditional use permit with subject to the conditions, which you'll get from Tim in a correspondence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for all of the work that went into presenting what's a very complicated project to us. You guys did a great job of continuing to work through all of the efforts.
Thank you for all the time and effort you put in. Thank you.
When it gets late, we're more charitable.
Yes. All right, let's see if we can finish up our meeting real quick. Number 5 on our agenda is the Dumas Lane Road Bond Reduction, and it's a discussion and possible action regarding reduction of a road bond for Dumas Lane. I have in my package, does everybody have a copy of the memo from Kyle?
No, I think it's only usually.
Okay.
It's here somewhere.
It's in everybody's package. Oh, then it is.
Everybody does have it. Okay, so Bean Road Realty, I'm sorry, what? I have it. The original recommended reduction in bond from the original amount of $446,035 to $78,434.37. The original bond amount has previously been reduced to $226,596, approved by the Planning Board on September 10th, 2013. It contains all the necessary supports in terms of what's been built and has the necessary signatures by Kyle Fox as of August 1st.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we agree to the reduction in bond as submitted by Kyle Fox.
Second. Tim, is there anything else that we need to add to that? Does that work for you?
That works.
Any discussion?
Lynn was the second?
Yes, Lynn was the second.
A couple of questions. This is the performance bond. It does not relate to the maintenance bond,
No.
right?
That's correct.
Then, and the amount that the maintenance bond, when it's done, will be based upon the original total quantity.
That is correct.
Which is it 446,000 or is it in excess of that?
446.
It'll be 10, is it 10% usually?
Yes.
Okay, okay, thank you, we got that.
Okay. All in favor of the motion to approve the bond reduction, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0 to approve the bond reduction. Item number 6 on our agenda. Let's have it, Stan.
Go by this. The medical building in back of the emergency medical building that's being built in back of the state liquor store.
Convenient.
They were before us, and we did ask them about signage, and they said everything's gonna be the way the town wants it. Now, right away, they're in front of the zoning board, because they wanna add another 50% to their sign. And I just don't think that
There is a reasonable compromise being made in this situation. They're opting to forego having a freestanding sign if they're successful getting the additional wall signage.
Okay, it's only what I read on the agenda, and it just seems more people seem to be coming before the planning board, say, yeah, we'll agree, this is what we'll do, and then they head to the easy zoning board that rubber stamps everything.
It's their right to do so.
Yeah, I think that's the end of it, is when they say that we're gonna comply with the town's requirements, getting a variance of the town's requirements is within that scope of compliance.
Yeah.
Now, also, I don't wanna
That's
disparage
all.
our zoning board, who is doing a fine job at meeting all of their legal
The
requirements.
other item under other items of concern is the 2015 draft meeting schedule. Would like some endorsement on that so I can get rooms scheduled ahead of other
Go
boards
ahead.
and committees.
This looked fine with me. I didn't have any corrections or objections to it. If nobody else does, then Tim, go ahead with that. Does anyone else have discussion and possible action regarding other items of
Do you
concern?
want this?
Mike? That's separate. That's for you.
You and I, okay.
Mike?
It just seems like a lot of the things that we've been talking about with the CUP has to do with just not being very clear in our ordinance. We've already talked about that a little bit, about trying to make some changes with the junkyard. I'm wondering if it makes sense for us to be prescriptive rather than performance-based, where it's just not if we want something, then we should say it. Good ordinances say what we want, and maybe it's
If
the
I
time for
can
something.
kind of get to, I know Attorney Westgate mentioned the master plan and mixed use. What that master plan recommendation is not necessarily saying use what's on the books now. It's for us to examine another approach to mixed use through zoning that needs a little bit more refinement and basically would be something new, not necessarily the existing conditional use permit process, but perhaps a rezoning to a completely different district that allows mixed uses or some other approach. So it's a little bit connecting dots that don't really connect in terms of what that master plan recommendation is. It's not necessarily saying that, yes, the I-1 mixed-use conditional use permit should be done here. It's the town needs to take a harder look at mixed use because that seems to be the appropriate area for those types of developments. So that is on the radar screen, and it's certainly something that, in terms of zoning ordinance amendments, I don't like doing these piecemeal little changes, but when I'm directed from upstairs in the town manager's office, I kind of go ahead and do them. But there is a comprehensive look at the ordinance that I'm going to be taking a look at. I have some old work that was originally done back when Walter was here that Steve Keach was involved with in terms of reorganizing the ordinance. So I think that's probably going to be my first step, is once I get through the self-storage facilities, which, by the way, has a public hearing Thursday night this week. These little minor changes for junkyards and other clerical changes. I think at that point, I'm going to start taking a harder look at not making substantive changes to the ordinance, but looking at putting the ordinance in an order that makes more sense. And then once that reorganization is done, then we start looking at the substantive areas that the master plan recommends.
Thank you, Tim, for that. I think, Mike, you make a great suggestion as well, just in terms of always wanting to be proactive and taking a look at our ordinance. As it relates to conditional use permits, it may not be as critical an issue to address because the parcels in town which are sizable enough to do it are already before us. And anymore. So once we're done with the Edgebrook and Flatley, that's
based on that the zoning board doesn't create another one.
Or that we don't rewrite it to allow smaller parcels as well. But and if we did, then we'd have to take a look at that. But
Mr. Chairman, there are some parcels in town that still could, even though they may have some development on them already, that could
That's
come
true.
under this.
That's true.
Several.
That's true. So my short selling the process is premature. Do that. Before we do minutes, there was some other discussion or possible action regarding other item of concern, but I don't remember what it was.
It was minutes.
We'll save it for next time, whatever it was isn't that important. We've got draft minutes of August 5th in our package. Stan, what's your motion? No motion from Stan?
I'll move to approve as printed.
Move by Lynn to approve as printed. Is there a second for that?
A second.
Second by Desiree?
With comments.
With comments.
With
What
a
are your
co-
fixes?
yeah. Page 5, line 32. I'll start at 31 just to say, there is talk of connecting over to Allen Road, which is a paper street. What's a paper street? Is that right?
A paper street is a road right-of-way that exists that does not currently actually have a roadway in it.
Okay.
Somebody laid it out on a map and dedicated it, or
It's on a map, but it's not there.
Paper, but not physical.
Yeah, that's it. That's my only one.
anything else?
Comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
I thought this was an excellent set of minutes. I don't know where they came from, but they were, it was
These are
15 pages.
Don McMillan, who typically does the town council and conservation commission. She's my backup for when Zina's not available.
Okay, I was just, it's got a lot of detail, and I couldn't find any mistakes in it.
Pretty good work.
There were before you saw them, though.
There you go.
They were, what? I didn't hear you.
He fixed them already, kind of got in there and got it.
Okay.
All in favor of approving the minutes with the change suggested by Desiree, say aye.
Is that a change?
There was no change, right?
No
Say aye.
As printed?
As printed, aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining?
Yeah, I abstain, Mr. Chairman, as I wasn't here.
601 with Mr. Milnes abstaining for approving the August 5th minutes. I do remember the other thing I wanted to mention, that is the council meeting where the zoning ordinance will appear is also one where Mike and Lynn may be reappointed by the council, and Nelson has some effort before them from the town center committee. And so it's a fairly active planning board kind of a night.
This Thursday?
This Thursday.
And I want to thank Tim for doing.
Really, I haven't seen an agenda that long in a long time.
Rereading the minutes before we get them.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you for that.
Much more productive.
I just thank Tim generally for all the support he does because, man, we'd never get through this stuff without you and all in your whole team, Tim. Thank you, seriously.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Seconded by Lynn Christensen. All in favor of adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? We are adjourned.